They gave my sister a $1.2 million property, and now they're confused why I'm distant. I 33M never thought I'd write something like this, but I need to get it off my chest because this has been eating at me for almost 2 years. I grew up in a middle-class family in Oregon. My parents, Patrick and Susan, worked hard their whole lives, dad in construction and mom as a school counselor. I have one younger sister, Emily 31F, and even though we were close as kids, things have changed a lot since adulthood. Growing up, it was pretty clear Emily was my parents' favorite. I don't even mean that bitterly. It's just how things were. She was the golden child, straight A's, cheerleader. Went to an Ivy League school on scholarship. I wasn't a bad kid, but I was more average. I went to community college, then started my own contracting business. My parents were supportive, but all the praise, attention, and money always seemed to flow toward Emily. Still, I loved my sister and my parents. I did all the good son things. Sunday dinners, fixing their leaky pipes, mowing their lawn, even helping remodel parts of their house for free. It wasn't a big deal to me. They were family, but things changed when Emily got married. Her husband, Ryan, works in tech, and they live in California. They're doing well. Very well. The kind of post pictures from Bali every 3 months, well. When my parents decided to sell their vacation cabin on the Oregon coast, I didn't think much of it. It was a beautiful 3-bedroom place with ocean views, the kind of home that had been in our family for years. I assumed they'd sell it, split whatever came from it, or use it for retirement, except they didn't sell it. They gave it to Emily, as in, transferred the deed free and clear, no loan, no pay us back later. Just, it's yours now. When I found out, I honestly thought it was a joke. Emily called me one night, super excited, saying, "Mom and Dad are giving us the beach house. We can't believe it." She said it so casually, like she was announcing a new couch. I hung up the phone and immediately called my parents. I asked if it was true. My dad said, "Yeah, it just made sense. Emily and Ryan have kids, and we wanted to make sure they had a family place to go." I just sat there in silence. They hadn't mentioned it to me at all. I tried to keep my cool and said, "Okay, but that house is worth over $1 million. Are you guys sure that's fair?" My mom sighed and said, "Honey, it's not about fair. You're doing well on your own. You have your business. Emily's got the little ones, and they could really use the stability." That word, stability, pissed me off more than anything. Emily and Ryan make way more than I do. Meanwhile, I've been working 60-hour weeks trying to build something from scratch. I tried not to explode, but I told them it hurt that they'd make such a huge decision and not even talk to me about it. My dad said, "We didn't want to cause drama," and my mom said, "You'll understand when you have kids." That was the moment I realized there was no point in arguing. After that, things got distant. I stopped coming over as much. I stopped answering every call. It wasn't intentional at first. It just hurt too much to be around them, they noticed, of course. My mom started asking why I was being cold. I told her I needed space, that I felt like I'd been written out of the family's future. She said, "Oh, stop being dramatic. We're not dead. You'll inherit plenty someday." That was it. That line broke something in me. It wasn't about inheritance. It was about respect. It was about feeling like my relationship with them had a price tag. I stopped going to holidays when they invited me for Thanksgiving that year. I told them I was spending it with my girlfriend's family, my mom cried. My dad said I was punishing them for being generous. Maybe I was. Maybe that's what it looked like to them. But every time I tried to move on, I'd see Emily post pictures of the beach house, the same place where I'd spent every summer as a kid, fishing with Dad, playing cards with Mom on rainy nights. And now, it's their family house. The captions are always something like, "So grateful for this beautiful legacy." I don't think she realizes how that word, legacy, cuts like glass. Then a few months ago, my dad had a mild heart attack. He's okay now, thankfully. But I drove down to the hospital as soon as I heard. When I got there, Emily and Ryan were already there. Of course, my mom hugged me and said, "I'm glad you came. I know things have been weird, but maybe this can bring us all together again." And for a moment, I thought maybe it could, but that night, as we were talking in the waiting room, Ryan casually mentioned that they were looking into building an addition on the beach house, maybe a 4th bedroom. My mom smiled and said, "That'll be perfect for when we visit." No one even looked at me. I felt invisible in that room. After that, I just checked out emotionally. I still call my parents occasionally to make sure they're okay. I still send cards on birthdays, but I can't pretend it's the same. I can't pretend like there isn't a wall there. Emily reached out recently, saying she misses how close we used to be. She said, "I didn't ask for them to give me the house. You're mad at me for something I didn't control." Maybe she's right, but part of me wonders why she didn't at least question it. Why she didn't say, "Hey, shouldn't we split this?" I would have respected her so much if she had. Instead, she accepted it like it was hers by right. I've talked to a couple friends about it, and the reactions are split. Half of them think I'm justified for feeling hurt, and the other half say it's not worth ruining family relationships over stuff. But to me, it's not about the property. It's about being treated like I mattered less. When I look back now, I realize this didn't start with the beach house. It started years ago. The way my parents always gave Emily the newer car, the extra attention, the benefit of the doubt. The beach house was just the loudest example of something that's been happening my entire life. So I've decided I'm done chasing fairness. I'm done trying to prove I deserve equal love. I'll love my parents for who they are, but I'm not going to keep showing up for a version of family where I'm treated like an afterthought. If they ever ask why I don't come around much anymore, I'll just tell them the truth. Because when you give away a piece of your heart to one child, don't be surprised when the other stops showing up with theirs. Update. It's been about 9 months since I posted that, and to say things have shifted would be an understatement, not in some dramatic, movie-style way. More like the slow realization that the people you thought would always understand you just don't. After that whole situation, I kept my distance. I'd still text my parents occasionally, mostly short check-ins. "Hey, how's Dad's recovery?" Or "Happy birthday, Mom, nothing deep." I thought time might soften things. Maybe they'd reflect, maybe I would too. But it's like they built a new family dynamic and forgot to tell me I wasn't in it. The breaking point came this past spring when my girlfriend, Natalie, and I got engaged. I wasn't even planning on having a big wedding, but she comes from a large, loud, loving family, and they insisted on throwing us a small backyard engagement party at her parents' place. I invited my family because, well, it felt wrong not to. Emily texted me first, saying she was so happy for me and Ryan couldn't wait to meet Natalie. I appreciated that. Really, I did. My parents said they'd come too, and for a brief moment, I thought maybe things were going to be okay again. But when they arrived, it was like stepping back into that same imbalance I'd tried so hard to escape. My parents walked in carrying a bottle of wine. Nice, sure, but then immediately started telling everyone about Emily's new home renovation. They were showing pictures of the beach house addition, the one I'd heard about in the hospital, now fully complete. I don't even think they realized what they were doing. It's like they don't have an off switch when it comes to Emily. Meanwhile, Natalie's parents were introducing themselves, offering food, trying to make conversation. My mom said something like, "This is such a cute place. Reminds me of the beach property," loud enough for everyone to hear. I saw a few people glance at me, and I just forced a smile. I didn't want to make a scene, but later that night, when things quieted down and most people had left, my dad pulled me aside. He told me how proud they were of me for finally settling down, and that maybe now I'd understand the sacrifices parents make. I don't think he meant it condescendingly, but it hit like a gut punch. I asked him point blank, "Do you really not see why what you did hurt me?" He sighed and said, "Son, you've been nursing this grudge for too long. We did what we thought was best. It wasn't personal." But it was personal. It's always been personal. So I told him, probably more directly than I ever have, that it's not about a house or money. It's about how, my entire life, I've been treated like the supporting character in someone else's story. That it's exhausting feeling like every milestone I hit is just a footnote compared to Emily's. He got quiet for a while, then said, "You're reading too much into it." And that was the end of the conversation. I didn't argue, I didn't yell, I just nodded, walked away, and that was the moment something inside me finally let go. I realized I'd been waiting for an acknowledgement that was never going to come. A few weeks later, Emily called. She said Mom was upset that things still felt tense, and that she wanted to smooth things over before the wedding. I told her I appreciated that, but I needed time. She started crying, saying, "I didn't ask for any of this. I hate that you think I'm the villain." I told her, I don't think she's the villain. I just think she's the beneficiary of parents who never learned balance. We talked for almost an hour. It was probably the first honest conversation we've had in years. She admitted she'd felt guilty about the house, but also pressured to accept it because turning down $1 million gift felt ungrateful. I told her I understood. Because I do. It's not really her fault. But But I also told her that guilt without accountability doesn't change anything. By the end of that call, we agreed to take things slow. Try to rebuild a sibling relationship separate from our parents. That was probably the first time I felt hopeful in a long time. Then, last month, something unexpected happened. My dad called me out of the blue and asked if I could come by the house. Just to talk. I hesitated but agreed. When I got there, he and Mom were sitting at the kitchen table with coffee and a folder in front of them. It was the deed to their main house. They told me they'd decided to set up a trust, that when they passed, the home would go to me, and any remaining assets would be split equally between me and Emily. My dad said, "We realized maybe we didn't handle things the right way before." It was the closest I'd ever heard him come to an apology. I didn't know whether to be relieved or insulted. It felt transactional, like they were trying to fix years of emotional imbalance with a legal document. I thanked them, genuinely, but told them that wasn't what I needed. I said, "You can't fix this with a piece of paper." I needed to feel like you saw me, not as the son who's fine on his own, but as someone worth showing up for, my mom cried. My dad looked down and just said, "We didn't mean to make you feel that way." It wasn't enough to erase everything, but it was something for the first time. I think they actually heard me. Since then, we've been cautiously reconnecting. I invited them over for dinner last week, and it was the first time they'd met Natalie's parents properly. It went surprisingly well. They were polite, quiet, and even complimented the meal which I cooked. "Thank you very much. It's still awkward. There's still history there, but I'm trying." What I've learned through all this is that sometimes distance isn't punishment, it's preservation. It's the space you need to stop bleeding for people who only ever notice you when you're gone. I'm not sure what our future looks like. I doubt things will ever be completely fair or balanced. But at least now, I've stopped waiting for them to change before I can move forward. And that feels like the real inheritance. Peace, final update. It's been almost 2 years since everything went down. And if you'd told me back then that I'd be writing this update from a place of peace instead of resentment, I would have laughed. But life has a strange way of evening things out. Not through fairness, but through perspective. Natalie and I got married last fall. It was small, simple, and perfect. We held it in Bend, Oregon, near a lake surrounded by pines. My parents were there, Emily too, with Ryan and their kids. It wasn't without tension at first. Everyone was nervous, walking on eggshells. But something shifted that day, before the ceremony. My mom came into the small cabin where I was getting ready. She looked nervous, clutching this tiny box. She handed it to me and said, "This was your grandfather's." Inside was an old pocket watch, one I remembered from childhood but thought was lost. She said, "He wanted you to have it one day. I just didn't realize how much I'd held on to it until recently." I swear, that moment hit harder than anything else she could have done. It wasn't about the watch. It was what it represented. Something finally passed down to me without me having to ask. When I walked down that aisle and saw Natalie standing there, smiling, radiant, steady, it felt like all the noise from the past few years faded out. For once, the people who loved me were right where they should be, and I didn't feel like I was missing a piece anymore. After the wedding, things with my parents began to slowly thaw. It wasn't instant, and it wasn't magical, but it was real. My dad started calling me more, not about money or logistics, but just to talk about fishing, old tools, even random stuff like his new grill setup. My mom started sending me recipes again, just like she used to when I lived on my own. Little things, but they mattered. Emily and I, surprisingly, are closer now than we've been since high school. We talk a couple times a week, usually about normal stuff, work, family, life. I think she finally understood that her privilege within the family dynamic came at a cost. Too, she admitted one night over the phone. I always felt pressure to live up to being the favorite. It wasn't as easy as it looked. That hit me harder than I expected. We're not perfect siblings, but we're trying. We even took a siblings-only trip last month. No parents, no partners, just us. We drove up to Mount Rainier, hiked a bit, and talked about our childhood. At one point she said, "I wish they'd done things differently." I told her, "So do I, but I think we're doing better now." And we are. But the biggest shift has been internal. When all this started, I was obsessed with fairness. I wanted balance, equality, some sign that I mattered just as much as my sister. What I've realized since is that fairness doesn't always come from others. It starts with you deciding to stop measuring your worth by what people give or take. The beach house? Still theirs. Still in Emily's name. I've been there once since everything blew up. She invited Natalie and me for a weekend. And honestly, it was nice, weird, but nice. We sat on the porch where I used to fish with my dad. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I just felt grateful for the memories that were still mine. Even if the house wasn't funny enough, my dad joined us for a day trip that weekend. He looked older, slower, but happier too. He and I took a walk down to the water. He stopped and said quietly, "I didn't realize how much we hurt you until you stopped showing up," I told him. "Sometimes that's the only way people see it." He nodded and said, "I'm glad you came back anyway." That was his version of an apology, and honestly, it was enough. Since then, things have been steady. My parents have been to our house several times. Yes, our house. Natalie and I bought a small fixer-upper just outside of Portland. Ironically, it's about 20 minutes from the beach. Not far from where that old cabin was. We renovated it ourselves. Every tile, every beam, every nail. When my dad came to see it for the first time, he ran his hand along the doorframe and said, "You've built something solid here." He meant the house. But I think he also meant my life, Mom cried when she saw the guest room. I'd framed a few old photos on the wall, one of me and Emily as kids, another of my parents when they were young. She looked at them and said, "I forget sometimes how fast everything goes," I told her. "Me too. And that's kind of the point, isn't it? You can spend years angry about what you didn't get, or you can start appreciating what's still in front of you. I'll never forget the pain of feeling like I wasn't enough for my parents, but I've stopped letting it define how I love them, or myself. The truth is, I didn't need a $1-2 million house to feel valued. I needed to build a life that didn't depend on someone else finally noticing my worth. And I did that sometimes when I'm working on the porch late at night. Natalie will come out with a glass of wine, sit beside me and say, "You seem lighter lately." And I am, because I finally understand something I didn't before. Peace isn't about equality, it's about release. I don't need my parents to rewrite the past. I just need to keep writing my own story differently. And for the first time, I think I'm finally doing that. Stories number 2. The night that broke my trust. I never thought I'd be the guy who had to write one of these posts. But here I am, it's 2 a.m., and I can't sleep. I've rewritten this draft at least 6 times, trying to make sense of what happened last weekend. And the more I go over it, the more confused I feel. I've been dating Emily for just over 2 years. She's 25, I'm 27. We met at a friend's birthday dinner in Austin, hit it off instantly, and within a few months we were practically inseparable. She's the kind of person who lights up a room without even realizing it. Funny, quick-witted, and effortlessly kind. Everyone loves her, which is both one of the best and hardest things about dating her. I've always trusted her. She has a lot of friends, including guys, and that never really bothered me. I've never wanted to be the jealous boyfriend. I've seen how ugly that can get. But lately there's been this one guy, Ben, who's made me uneasy. Ben's one of her oldest friends from college. They were in the same photography club, and apparently they used to hang out all the time. He lives about an hour away now, but every few weeks he comes into town for shoots. I've met him maybe 3 times. He's polite enough, kind of artsy, quiet, the type who wears thrift store flannels and drinks black coffee like it's a religion. The first time I noticed something weird was when Emily started texting him late at night. Nothing romantic or flirty, at least from what she showed me. Just memes, random inside jokes, the kind of stuff old friends share. But it was constant. Like, she'd be laughing at her phone during dinner. And when I'd ask, "What's so funny?" she'd just smile and say, "Oh, Ben sent me something dumb." It bugged me. But I told myself it was fine. She was open about it. She'd even show me their conversations sometimes. Still, something about it felt off. Like he got a version of her I didn't always get. Fast forward to last weekend. Emily had plans to go on a short camping trip with a few of her old college friends. It was supposed to be a 2-night thing at some state park about 3 hours away. I couldn't go because I had a work project due Monday, so I just told her to have fun and be safe. She left Friday afternoon with her friends, including Ben. Everything was fine until Saturday night. Around 11 p.m., I texted her, "Hey, how's it going?" No response. I figured she was asleep or out of service. The next morning, nothing. No message, no update. Around noon, she finally texted, "Hey babe, sorry, we lost signal last night. We're heading back soon." I didn't think much of it until she got home later that day. She looked tired, sunburned, messy hair, but still smiling. We hugged, kissed, and she started unpacking. I was helping her sort laundry when I noticed her flannel hoodie. One that wasn't hers. It was way too big. and definitely not something she'd normally wear. "Oh," she said, catching my look. "That's Ben's. It got cold. And I forgot my jacket." I nodded slowly. "Did he lend it to you, or did you borrow it?" She laughed. "Both, I guess." It was freezing. I didn't say anything else, but something inside me twisted. Later that night, we were lying on the couch watching a movie, and I casually asked how sleeping arrangements worked at the campsite. She said, "Oh, it was cramped. There were 4 tents, but one got a hole in it. So Ben and I shared his." I sat up immediately. "You shared a tent? Like, just you and him?" She looked confused, almost defensive. "Yeah, it was late, and it started raining. We had to double up. It wasn't a big deal. Nothing happened." I could feel my pulse in my ears. "Did you at least tell me you'd be sharing a tent with him?" "I didn't think I had to," she said, her tone sharp now. "It wasn't planned. It just happened." I didn't yell. I didn't accuse her of anything. I just sat there, trying to picture it. The two of them, in that small tent, close enough to feel each other breathe. The image made my stomach knot up. I asked quietly, "Did you sleep in the same sleeping bag?" She rolled her eyes. "No, Jamie, we had separate sleeping bags. Jesus, you really think I'd cheat on you like that?" "No," I said. "But you shared a bed, essentially. It's not about sex, it's about boundaries." She got up, frustrated. "It wasn't a bed, it was a tent floor. I'm not going to apologize for not freezing to death in the woods." We didn't talk for the rest of the night. She slept in the guest room. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. Made coffee, played music, humming under her breath. I asked if we could talk, and she sighed. "You're still upset about that?" I told her yes, I was, because even if nothing physical happened, the choice to sleep next to another guy, a guy who's already made me uncomfortable, felt like a betrayal of trust. She said I was being dramatic and controlling. That word, controlling, hit hard. I've never tried to tell her who she can talk to, what to wear, or where to go. But I also believe relationships have lines you don't cross, and sharing a bed, even platonically, crosses one. I called my best friend, Chris, for perspective. He said, "Dude, if my girlfriend slept next to another guy, I'd lose it. That's not normal." But then my sister, Erin, told me, "If you trust her, you have to take her at her word. People crash in weird ways when camping." So I tried to push it down. I told myself it was just a misunderstanding. But the more I thought about it, the less that explanation worked. Emily didn't act guilty, but she didn't act particularly remorseful either. 2 days later, Ben posted pictures from the trip on Instagram. There was one photo of the group sitting by the fire, and right there, Emily leaning against his shoulder, smiling, not asleep, not cold, just leaning like it was the most natural thing in the world. It felt like someone punched me in the chest. I showed her the post and said, "You didn't think that might look a little intimate?" She shrugged. "You're overanalyzing everything. We've barely talked since. She says she loves me, that I'm her person. But I can't shake the feeling that something cracked. I can't stop imagining that night, her in his hoodie, laughing, curled up in that tiny tent while I sat at home, working late, missing her. It's not that I think she cheated. It's that I don't know if she gets it. I don't know if she understands that trust isn't just about fidelity. It's about respect, about not putting your partner in a position where they have to wonder what's real." Tonight, she asked if I was ever going to forgive her. I didn't have an answer. I told her I needed time. She said she was tired of walking on eggshells. And maybe we both need space, so here I am, alone in my apartment, staring at her coffee mug still on the counter, trying to decide if this is something I can move past, or if it's the quiet end of something I thought would last forever. "I keep thinking about that moment," she said. "It wasn't a bed. It was a tent floor. Maybe that's true. Maybe it really was nothing. But to me, it wasn't about where they slept. It was about where I stood. And right now, I have no idea where that is anymore." It's been a little over 3 weeks since I posted. I didn't expect the amount of messages I got. Some supportive, some calling me insecure, and a few that hit a little too close to home. I didn't respond to most of them because, honestly, I didn't know what to say. I was still trying to process what I was feeling. After that night, things between Emily and me got quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful. We weren't fighting outright, but the tension was heavy enough to choke on. I'd wake up, go to work, come home, and she'd already be sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone or watching some comfort show on Netflix. We'd exchange polite words. "How was work? Did you eat yet?" But the connection we had was gone. One night, about a week later, she came into the bedroom and sat at the edge of the bed. "We can't keep doing this," she said softly. I looked up from my laptop. Doing what? This, she said, gesturing between us, tiptoeing around each other like we're strangers. You're angry, I'm defensive, and it's miserable. She was right. I was angry, not shouting angry, hurt angry. The kind that simmers. I told her that, she said. I didn't cheat on you, Jamie. I need you to believe that, I said. I want to. But believing it doesn't erase how it made me feel. We went back and forth for hours. Not yelling. Just unraveling, she explained in detail. How that night happened. Apparently, the tent she was supposed to sleep in had a broken zipper. It started raining hard, and everyone was scrambling. Ben offered space in his tent, because his was the only one that wasn't soaked. She swore she kept her own sleeping bag zipped the entire night, facing the opposite side. I listened. I wanted to believe her, and maybe I did. But even if she was telling the truth, I told her that it wasn't about the physical boundary. It was about the emotional one. That she should have realized how sharing a sleeping space with another man, especially one she knows I'm uneasy about, could hurt me. She started crying then, quietly. I didn't even think about it that way. I just wanted to stay warm. I didn't mean to make you feel like this. It's hard to describe what that moment felt like. I could see she was being honest, but the damage was already done. Some part of me wanted to reach out, hold her, tell her it was okay. Another part wanted to keep my distance because trust isn't something you can rebuild with an apology and a few tears. Over the next week, we tried to repair things. She deleted Ben's number for now, as she put it, and said she wouldn't talk to him unless it was absolutely necessary. But that gesture didn't land the way she probably hoped it would. It didn't feel like a choice. It felt like a peace offering. At the same time, I started questioning myself. Was I overreacting? Were all those commenters right that I was letting insecurity run the show? I talked to Chris again, my best friend, and he said something that stuck. There's a difference between being insecure and being disrespected. The difference is whether the other person acknowledges your feelings. That hit hard. A few days later, I went out with a coworker, Nicole, for a drink after work. We've known each other for years, purely platonic, but I realized something while sitting there. She kept asking how I was, and I found myself venting about Emily. Not in a flirty way. Not even with any intention behind it, but because I needed someone to talk to. When I got home, I told Emily about it, not to rub it in. But because I didn't want to hide anything, I said, I grabbed a drink with Nicole after work. I just needed to get out of my head. Emily froze for a second, then said, oh. Her tone changed immediately. You went out with another woman to talk about me? I said, she's a friend. You know her. I don't care, she snapped. That's still weird. I wanted to laugh at the irony. But I didn't. I just said, now you know how I felt? She went quiet. Then she said, that's not fair, I said. Neither was what you did. That conversation didn't end well. She grabbed her keys and went for a drive, came back a few hours later, and we slept in separate rooms again. The next morning, she left early for work and texted me around noon. I think we both need time apart. I love you, but this is starting to hurt more than it's helping. I didn't respond right away. I sat at my desk, staring at that message for nearly an hour. Then I finally typed back, I agree. Maybe space will help us figure out what we actually want. She packed a bag that night and went to stay with her friend Leah. Before leaving, she hugged me, just once, long and quiet. I could feel her shaking a little, she whispered. I didn't mean to ruin this, I said. I know. And then she was gone. That was 12 days ago. We haven't talked much since. Just a few texts about practical stuff. Picking up mail, bills, small logistics. I miss her like hell. But there's also this strange calm that's settled in. Like I can breathe again, even though it hurts. I don't know what's next. Maybe we'll find our way back to each other. Maybe we won't. I still love her. But love feels complicated now. It's not about one night in a tent. It's about realizing that trust can break quietly. Even without betrayal, if there's one thing this whole mess taught me, it's that love isn't measured by how much you can forgive, but by how much both people are willing to protect what you've built. And somewhere along the way, we both forgot to protect it. It's been about 5 months since my last update, and I've been debating whether to write this at all. But the first post and the update got so many responses. Some kind, some brutally honest, that it feels right to give closure. Both for anyone still curious and maybe for myself. After Emily moved out, we didn't talk for nearly 6 weeks. That silence was both the hardest and most clarifying time of my life. The first couple of weeks I was a wreck. Every part of my daily routine reminded me of her. The smell of her shampoo still lingering in the bathroom, the half-empty bottle of oat milk she liked in the fridge, her favorite blanket draped over the couch like she'd just stepped out for a minute. I tried to distract myself. I picked up extra projects at work, went running again, started cooking actual meals instead of living on takeout. But no matter what I did, my mind kept circling back to her. Not in a bitter way, just this constant ache of unfinished business. Then one night, I ran into Ben. Yeah, that Ben. I was out with co-workers at a small bar downtown, and there he was, sitting at the counter with a camera bag slung over his shoulder, drinking what I can only assume was his usual black coffee, because of course he was that guy. He noticed me before I even had a chance to slip away. He raised his hand slightly, an awkward half-wave, and said, "Jamie, right?" I almost ignored him, but something in me wanted to hear what he had to say, so I walked over. He looked nervous. Like he wasn't sure if I was going to deck him, he said, "Hey, I know I'm probably the last person you want to see, but I wanted to clear the air." I didn't say much, just stared. He continued, "I never meant to cause problems between you and Emily. That night, nothing happened. She slept in her own bag. We barely even talked. I swear to God, and for whatever reason, I believed him. Maybe it was the way he said it. Steady, calm, not trying to convince me, just stating a fact. He looked tired. Then he said, "She really loves you, man. She talked about you a lot that weekend." Like, a lot, I nodded, not sure how to respond. We didn't talk much after that. Just a few polite words before I went back to my table. But the encounter rattled me. Not because I thought he was lying, but because it forced me to face something I'd been avoiding. The problem was never Ben. It was us a few days later. Emily texted me for the first time since she'd left. "Hey, would you be open to meeting for coffee sometime?" No pressure. I said yes. We met at this quiet cafe near her new apartment. She looked different, calmer somehow. Her hair was shorter, and she wore that same denim jacket she always used to throw on when we'd go for late-night drives. Seeing her smile again felt like a punch to the chest. We sat there for almost 3 hours. She told me she'd been going to therapy, trying to work through her tendency to downplay people's feelings, as she put it. She admitted she hadn't truly understood how her choices had made me feel until she'd had time to sit with it. "I didn't cheat," she said again softly, "but I hurt you, and I didn't take responsibility for that." I kept trying to justify it instead of just saying, "I'm sorry." I told her I appreciated that. Then I said, "I also have to own my part. I let resentment turn into distance instead of telling you right away what I needed." I thought staying calm meant I was being rational, but really, I was just building a wall. We both sat there in silence after that. Not awkward. Just honest. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I miss you," she whispered. And for the first time in months, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel betrayed. I just felt sad. Sad for what we lost. For how something that had been so good for so long got twisted up in pride and poor communication. We met up a few more times after that. A hike, dinner, a movie at her place. Each time felt like two people cautiously circling something familiar but fragile. I could tell she wanted to get back together. And part of me did too. But the truth is, something between us had shifted permanently. I loved her, but it wasn't the same kind of love. It was softer, quieter, more reflective. Not the love that builds a future, but the kind that lingers as gratitude for what was. A few weeks later, we sat down one last time. She said, "I think we both know this isn't going back to what it was." I nodded. "No, it's not." She smiled sadly. "Then let's not drag it out." We hugged for a long time. One of those hugs where you can feel every memory packed into it. And then we said goodbye. That was 2 months ago. Since then, I've been focusing on myself. I started taking photography classes, funny enough. Maybe part of me wanted to understand the world she loved through her lens. I even took a solo trip out west, camped alone for the first time in my life. It was freezing one night, and I laughed out loud remembering that stupid tent argument. And somewhere out there, under all that quiet sky, I realized something important. Love doesn't always fail because of betrayal or tragedy. Sometimes it just breaks under the weight of misunderstanding, of assuming the other person knows where your boundaries end and theirs begin. We loved each other, we didn't cheat, we didn't lie, but we also didn't protect what mattered. I still think about her sometimes. When I hear her favorite song, when I pass that coffee shop, I hope she's okay. I think she is. As for me, I'm learning that closure isn't one big moment. It's 1,000 tiny ones. Deleting the last photo, moving her mug from the counter, realizing you don't check your phone, waiting for her name to pop up anymore. So, yeah, that's where I'm at. Healing, slowly, honestly, if she ever reads this. Emily, I hope you know I never stopped wishing you the best. We were real, even if it didn't last. And for that, I'll always be grateful. Stories number 3. I realize some women don't actually support other women. When you stop playing the part they expect. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but lately, I've been struggling with how alienating it can be to exist as a woman who doesn't always perform the way people think I should. I'm 27, I live in Oregon, and I was diagnosed with ADHD and autism spectrum disorder earlier this year. It explained a lot. Why social situations drain me, why I fixate on things that others shrug off, why I'm constantly replaying conversations in my head wondering if I said something weird. When I first got my diagnosis, I felt relieved. Finally, there was a reason behind all the things that made me feel off. But what I didn't expect was how much it would change my relationships with other women, especially the ones I thought were my closest friends. I've always been the kind of person who struggles with small talk. I do better with conversations that have depth, about life, feelings, or things that matter. That doesn't always mesh with brunch groups and workplace happy hours. I can hold my own, but there's a limit. I think people often mistake my bluntness or quietness for rudeness, and I get labeled intense or cold. At work, I'm in marketing, and a lot of the culture is built around socializing. There's this expectation of being bubbly and effortlessly charming, and I just can't fake that every day. I'll show up, smile, make conversation, but it feels like I'm wearing an invisible costume that doesn't fit right. There's this one coworker, Ashley, who's basically the social glue of the office. Everyone adores her. She's confident, stylish, funny. We used to be friendly. We'd eat lunch together, gossip about random stuff, share memes. But over time, I noticed how her tone toward me changed. It started with little comments like, "You're always so serious," or, "You don't really do girl talk, do you?" I brushed it off at first, but then she started leaving me out of things. Coffee runs, group chats, after-work drinks. When I asked if something was wrong, she said, "Oh, it's just that you don't really seem into that kind of stuff." That stung because it wasn't true. I wanted to be included. I just didn't express it the same way. Outside of work, it's been similar. I used to have a friend group of 5 women I met through a local book club. We'd meet once a week, talk about books, grab dinner afterward. But as time went on, I noticed how performative the group dynamics were. Everything felt like an unspoken competition. Who could sound the most woke? Who had the most aesthetic apartment? Who had the perfect relationship? I always felt like I was 2 beats behind, like I was watching from the outside trying to decode what made everyone else fit so easily. One night, after one too many backhanded compliments, I snapped a little. One of them, Leah, was complaining about how needy her boyfriend was, and someone joked that she should train him better. Everyone laughed. I said quietly, "I don't think that's funny." The whole table went silent. Leah rolled her eyes and said, "God, you always make things so awkward." That was the moment I realized it wasn't just me feeling out of place. They wanted me to feel that way. After that night, the invites slowly stopped. They still posted pictures together, brunches, girls' nights, wine tastings, but I wasn't part of them anymore. When I texted Leah to ask if everything was okay, she replied, "We just figured you weren't that into the group vibe." The truth is, I've always been into connection, real connection. I love people deeply, even when I don't know how to express it the way they expect. But it feels like a lot of women, especially the ones who preach about inclusivity and empathy, only extend that empathy if you play the part of the relatable, socially polished woman. I've had so many conversations with neurodivergent women online who've experienced the same thing. The subtle hostility, the micro-exclusions, the way people weaponize the word awkward as if it's a moral flaw. It's wild how often we're told to just be ourselves. But the moment we stop masking, people recoil. I've tried to be more open about it lately. I started mentioning my diagnosis casually, not as an excuse but as context. Some people respond with kindness, but others get weirdly dismissive, like, "Everyone has a little ADHD these days," or, "You don't seem autistic." The last one always hits hard. It's like they want me to perform a stereotype just so they can feel comfortable categorizing me. Even dating has been a minefield. I've had guys tell me I'm hard to read, or that I seem emotionally distant. I'm not. I just process emotions differently. I show care through acts and consistency, not constant validation, but that's not what people expect, especially from women. I know it sounds bitter, but it's not all bad. I've slowly found my people, the ones who get it. My friend Aaron, who's also neurodivergent, is one of them. We met in a Reddit support group. Of all places, we can sit in silence for hours, doing our own thing, and it never feels weird. There's no pressure to perform, no expectation to read social cues perfectly, just calm understanding. I've also started seeing a therapist who specializes in late diagnosis neurodivergence. She's helped me unlearn the guilt of not fitting in. She told me something that stuck. You're not hard to love. You've just been trying to be lovable in a language that isn't yours. That hit me like a brick. I still struggle sometimes. When I see old friends posting together, part of me aches. But I'm learning to make peace with being misunderstood. I'm learning that I don't need to shapeshift to be worthy of belonging. I think a lot of women say they support authenticity, but they really mean, as long as it's palatable. The moment you stop laughing at jokes you don't find funny, or decline an event because you're overstimulated, or speak too directly, they turn on you. I don't hate those women. I just finally see them clearly. I used to think I was broken because I couldn't do friendship the way they did. But now I think maybe I've just been looking for the wrong kind of people. The real ones don't need a performance, they just see you. And stay. Update. It's been about 6 months since I wrote that post, and a lot has changed. Mostly in how I see myself, and how I choose to engage with other people. I didn't expect that writing it would be such a turning point, but it ended up being the moment I stopped trying to fix something that wasn't broken. When I first shared my story, I was angry and tired. Tired of being misunderstood. Tired of being made to feel like an inconvenience. But time and distance have given me some perspective. I still think a lot of women hold each other to impossible, performative standards. But I've also realized that not everyone who hurt me did it out of malice. Some of it was ignorance. Some of it was just social conditioning. After that falling out with my old friend group, I avoided any kind of social situation for months. I told myself I was just focusing on work, but really, I was scared. Every time I tried to connect with someone, I'd overthink every text, every pause in conversation, every moment of silence. It felt safer to just stay alone. Then one day, Erin, the friend I mentioned in the original post, called me out, gently but honestly. She said, "You can't isolate forever. You deserve connection too, even if it looks different from what other people have." She was right. So I started small. I joined a local art therapy group. Mostly out of curiosity, I didn't expect to click with anyone. But I met 2 people who surprised me. Jamie, who has ADHD, and Rowan, who's neurotypical but deeply empathetic. We bonded over how exhausting it is to live in a world where being too much, or not enough, can change depending on who's in the room. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to adjust the volume of my personality. I could talk about things that genuinely interested me. Books, psychology, music composition, and no one zoned out or made me feel weird for it. When I went nonverbal for a few minutes, once something that happens when I'm overstimulated, they didn't act uncomfortable. They just waited, gave me space, and we picked up again naturally. I can't explain how healing that was. Meanwhile, things at work shifted too. Ashley, the co-worker who used to subtly exclude me, recently got promoted and transferred to another department. Her absence changed the team dynamic completely. Without her, people actually started including me more, asking for my input, inviting me to lunch. It made me realize how much influence one person's social behavior can have on an environment. The most surprising moment came during a recent team meeting. My manager, Tom, pulled me aside afterward and said, "I've noticed how you approach things differently, and it's a strength. You see patterns the rest of us miss." It wasn't performative or pitying. It was genuine recognition. That one sentence undid months of feeling invisible outside of work. I've started being more upfront about my neurodivergence. I used to avoid mentioning it because I was afraid people would think I was using it as an excuse. But now I say it calmly, like a fact, because that's what it is. I've learned that the right people don't need long explanations. They just adjust, care, and move forward. I also reconnected with Leah, the friend from the book club who once told me I made things awkward. She reached out unexpectedly after seeing my post online. Turns out it got shared around on a few forums. Her message was long and thoughtful. She admitted she hadn't understood what I was going through at the time, and that she'd been unfair. I didn't expect an apology, but it honestly brought some peace. We met for coffee, and while things aren't magically the same, it wasn't tense. She said she's been working on being less judgmental and more aware of how she interacts with others. I could tell she meant it. It reminded me that people can grow too. I think what's changed most is my internal voice. I don't pick myself apart as much anymore. When someone doesn't click with me, I don't spiral into thinking I said the wrong thing or that I'm unlovable. Sometimes people just aren't compatible, and that's fine. Erin once said something that stuck with me. Masking all the time is like holding your breath. You can only do it for so long before you suffocate. I think I finally exhaled. Now my circle is smaller, 3 or 4 people I truly trust, but it feels solid. There's no competition, no pretending, no constant decoding, just understanding. I don't think I'll ever fully fit into the mainstream version of womanhood that expects constant warmth, emotional labor, and soft edges. But I've stopped seeing that as a flaw. My way of being, honest, observant, sometimes blunt, isn't broken. It's just different, and for the first time, that feels like enough. Final update. It's been almost a full year since I wrote that first post, and reading it now feels like opening a time capsule from a version of me who was still trying to figure out how to exist without apology. I've grown a lot since then, not just in how I see myself, but in how I understand other people too. The biggest change is that I don't carry that constant feeling of rejection anymore. It's not that people stopped misunderstanding me. It's that I stopped making it my responsibility to make them comfortable. I used to replay every interaction, wondering what I could have said differently, or if I should have laughed more or talked less. Now, I let silence exist. I let myself exist. If someone finds that uncomfortable, that's not my problem to solve. After that art therapy group ended, the 3 of us, me, Jamie, and Rowan, kept hanging out. It started casually. Weekend coffee runs, art fairs, long talks about identity and burnout. Over time, those hangouts became something stable in my life. We've built a kind of friendship that doesn't rely on constant performance. We can sit in quiet, and it's not awkward. It's peaceful. I've realized that's what real connection feels like. Erin moved to another state earlier this year, but we still talk every week. Our friendship has been a lifeline. She's been one of the few people who never made me feel like I had to translate myself to be understood. Sometimes we'll just sit on video call, both doing our own thing, barely talking. And yet it feels like being in the same room with someone who gets you down to your core. Work has changed in good ways too. I finally stopped trying to be one of the girls. I don't join every lunch. I don't fake excitement for small talk. And surprisingly, that's made things better. I'm more focused, calmer, and less drained. The few people who genuinely like me seem to appreciate me more now that I'm not pretending. A couple of months ago, something unexpected happened. Ashley, the old coworker who used to exclude me, emailed me. She'd apparently seen my name on a professional panel for neurodiversity in the workplace that I'd been invited to speak at. Her email was short. Hey, I read your post a while back. I didn't realize how I came across back then. I'm sorry, I didn't expect that. I sat with it for a day before replying. I thanked her for reaching out and told her I appreciated it. I didn't say much else because honestly, I didn't need more. I'd already made peace with the past, but her acknowledgement felt like a small piece of closure I didn't know I wanted. As for Leah, our occasional coffee meetups have turned into an easy friendship again. Not like before, there's more space now, less pressure, but it's good. She's genuinely trying to be more mindful. The last time we talked, she said, "You were always honest." And I think that made me defensive because I wasn't ready to hear it. I told her I understood. And I do, we're all learning how to communicate better. I've also become more vocal about my experiences. Especially at work, that panel Ashley mentioned. It was terrifying, but empowering. I talked about what it's like to be a neurodivergent woman in environments that reward extroversion and social smoothness over substance. The feedback afterward was overwhelming. A few people reached out privately to say they felt the same but never had words for it. It made me realize how many of us are silently performing to fit into molds that don't suit us. But the real shift has been internal. I've stopped using words like weird, awkward, or too much to describe myself. I'm analytical, observant, quiet until I'm not, and deeply empathetic in ways that don't always show up through smiles or small talk. That's not something to fix. I've also learned that not every woman who's performative is doing it out of malice. Some of them are just surviving the same social system that taught us we need to be pleasing to be accepted. I can have compassion for that now without wanting to shrink myself to fit it. There's one small thing that happened recently that kind of summed it all up for me. I was at a friend's dinner party, something I would have avoided a year ago, and someone said, "You're really quiet, aren't you?" Normally I'd get defensive, try to prove I wasn't. But instead, I just smiled and said, "Yeah, I am. I like listening," and that was it. No awkward silence, no weird energy, just acceptance, of myself and from others. It's strange how peace sneaks up on you once you stop chasing it. I used to think I wanted to be liked by everyone. Now, I just want to be understood by the right ones. And I don't need to perform softness or charm to belong. The people who matter see my quiet, my honesty, my weird tangents, and my bluntness. And they stay, and that more than anything. Feels like freedom. Stories number 4. He asked for the ring back during a fight, so I told him to leave. I never imagined I'd be writing something like this. But here I am. I 29F have been with my fiancé, Brandon 31M, for 4 years. We met at a mutual friend's housewarming party. One of those nights where you don't plan to meet anyone special, and then boom, there they are. He was funny, charming, and he made me feel instantly at ease. Things moved fast. Within a year we were living together. Brandon proposed to me last summer in a park in Chicago, where we'd had our first date. It wasn't extravagant, just intimate and heartfelt. I cried, he cried. I genuinely thought I'd found the person I was going to spend the rest of my life with. But lately, things have been tense. We've both been under stress. Him with work, he's in finance and has been dealing with layoffs at his firm. And me with grad school while juggling 2 part-time jobs. We've had arguments before, but the last few months, they've become more frequent and honestly, more personal. Our fights used to be about little things. Laundry, groceries, forgetting to text. But recently, they've shifted to something deeper. Resentment, control, and the future. The big fight. The one that led to him leaving. Started over something ridiculously small. I'd gotten home late from class one night and realized he hadn't made dinner even though he said he would. I grabbed leftovers from the fridge, and I guess my silence made him feel like I was mad. He said, "You don't have to act all passive-aggressive." You know, that sentence set me off. I told him I wasn't being passive-aggressive. I was exhausted. From school, from work, from carrying more of the emotional load at home. He snapped back, saying he was tired too. That I never noticed when he was struggling. And then we were in it. Voices raised. Words flying faster than we could think. I said something like, "It's like you stopped trying once you proposed." And he threw his hands up and said, "Maybe because you've been impossible to please." The air in the room shifted. I remember crossing my arms and saying, "If you feel that way, then why are we even getting married?" He shot back, "Maybe we shouldn't," and then, in this cold, measured tone, he said, "Give me the ring back if you're done. Olivia." It was like all the oxygen got sucked out of the room. I stared at him, waiting for him to take it back, to laugh, to say he didn't mean it, but he didn't. He just stood there, jaw tight, eyes dark, and something in me broke. I took the ring off, walked over, and set it in his hand. Then I said, "If you want it that badly, take it, and get out." He looked stunned, like he didn't think I'd actually do it. He said, "Are you serious right now?" I told him, "Yes. You don't get to weaponize this ring every time we fight." He muttered something under his breath, something about me being dramatic, and started packing an overnight bag. Watching him do that felt surreal. I kept expecting him to stop and apologize, to say he was angry and didn't mean it. But he didn't. When he left, he slammed the door so hard a picture frame fell off the wall. I just stood there in the silence that followed, staring at the dent his keys made in the paint when he grabbed them too fast. I cried for hours that night, not because I missed him, though I did, but because I couldn't believe how easily he had reduced our engagement, our future, to a bargaining chip. The next morning he texted, "I shouldn't have said that, I didn't mean it." I just lost my temper, I didn't reply. 2 days later, he came by to pick up more of his things. He tried to act like everything was normal, cracking little jokes, saying he was sorry, that we could talk when I'd calm down. That line, "when I'd calm down," was like gasoline on a fire. I told him that if he wanted to talk, he needed to stop pretending he didn't cause any of this. He said, "You're the one who told me to leave," I said. "You're the one who asked for the ring back." He went quiet. We stood there for a long time, both of us waiting for the other to make the first move. Finally, he sighed and said, "I didn't mean it, Liv. I just felt cornered," I told him. "You're supposed to feel safe with me." Not cornered. He looked like he wanted to say something else. But he didn't. He just nodded, grabbed his stuff, and left again. It's been 3 weeks since then. He's been staying with a friend. I haven't asked him to come back. I've spent most nights on the couch, surrounded by the ghosts of our life together. His favorite mug, the dent in the couch where he used to sit, the empty space on my finger where the ring used to be. The truth is, I still love him deeply. But love shouldn't feel like walking on eggshells, waiting for the next fight to turn into a referendum on your entire relationship. A few days ago, he sent me another message. I want to fix this. I'll do whatever it takes. And I believe he means it, or at least, he believes he means it right now. But I don't know if that's enough anymore. Something shifted that night. Something I can't just pretend didn't happen. Because when someone asks for the ring back in anger, they're not just taking back a piece of jewelry. They're taking back the promise that came with it. Maybe we could still fix things. Maybe not. But I know one thing for sure. That ring isn't going back on my finger until I know he values the person wearing it more than the symbol itself. And for the first time since he left, I'm starting to think that maybe, just maybe, I deserve more than an apology that only comes after the damage is done. It's been about 6 weeks since that night, and the silence that followed has been louder than any argument we've ever had. I didn't expect things to feel this heavy for so long. The first week after Brandon left was all adrenaline. Cleaning, crying, overanalyzing every word, every look, every text. Then came the stillness, where I started to realize just how much of my identity had been wrapped up in us. Brandon tried reaching out a few times after that last text. He sent flowers once, sunflowers, because he remembered I said they reminded me of summer. The card said, "I miss you, I'm sorry. I love you," no long explanation, no begging, just that. Part of me wanted to call him immediately, but another part, the part that remembered standing in that apartment, holding my engagement ring like it was proof of something broken, told me to wait. I started seeing a therapist a few weeks ago. Her name's Karen, mid-40s, calm in that way only therapists seem to master. She helped me unpack a lot about how I handle conflict. I told her how Brandon and I both grew up in families where love was often mixed with control. Mine with guilt, his with silence. She said something that hit me hard. You both learned love through fear of loss, so every fight feels like survival. That stuck with me. About 2 weeks ago, Brandon asked if we could meet for coffee. I agreed. We met at this little cafe we used to go to on lazy Sunday mornings, a place where we'd usually share a muffin and talk about nothing for hours. When I walked in, he was already there. Sitting at our usual corner table, he looked exhausted, the kind of tired that sleep can't fix. I noticed right away he wasn't wearing his watch, the one I got him for his birthday. It was small, but I knew it meant something. He smiled when he saw me, but it was hesitant. I sat down, and we just looked at each other for a bit. Finally he said, "You look good," I told him. "You look like you've been through hell." He laughed quietly and said, "Fair." We talked. For almost 3 hours. It wasn't angry. It wasn't defensive. It was real. He admitted that when he asked for the ring back, it wasn't just anger, it was fear, he said. I felt like I was losing you, and if I couldn't fix it, I wanted to control something. Even if it was just that ring. I didn't interrupt him. I just listened. He said he'd been seeing someone too, a counselor recommended by a coworker, to work on his temper and communication. I could tell he was being honest. There was something different about him that day. His walls weren't as high. At one point, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring. My stomach dropped, but before I could say anything, he said, "I'm not asking you to take it back. I just wanted to give it back to you. It's yours, even if we never get married. I don't want it as a reminder of what I messed up." I didn't touch it. I told him I appreciated the gesture, but I wasn't ready. He nodded, put it back in his pocket, and said, "That's fair. We talked a bit more. About work, about the apartment, about the little routines we missed." It was weirdly comforting and painful at the same time, like visiting a home that doesn't belong to you anymore. Before we left, he said, "I still love you, Liv, but I know that's not enough right now." And he was right. After that, we started texting again. Not constant, but occasionally it was friendly, civil, no pressure. He'd send me a picture of his dog. I'd send a photo of a book I was reading. It felt gentle. But the more we talked, the more I realized something important. I missed who I thought we were, not who we actually became. A few nights ago, I was going through some of my old journals from before Brandon and I started dating. I found an entry from when I was 25, where I wrote about the kind of relationship I wanted. I'd written, "Someone who makes me feel safe, not small, Someone who fights with me, not against me. Reading that made me cry. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped asking for that. I kept making excuses for both of us. Stress, work, timing, but the truth was simpler. Love had turned into something fragile and conditional. Yesterday, Brandon stopped by one last time to grab the rest of his stuff. We talked at the door for a while, about how we'd both changed, how grateful we were for the good years, how sometimes growing up means growing apart. Before he left, he said, "You made me want to be better, Liv. I just wish I'd figured it out sooner," I told him. Maybe that's the point. Maybe we were meant to teach each other something, not keep each other. He smiled sadly, gave me one last hug, and walked away. I watched him go until he turned the corner, and I realized I wasn't crying. I just felt calm. That night, I finally took the ring out of the drawer. I held it for a long time, then put it in a small box and tucked it away. Not out of bitterness, just closure. Because for the first time in a long time, I don't feel like I'm waiting for him to come back. I'm just learning how to come back to myself. And maybe someday when I'm ready, I'll wear another ring. But it'll be because someone, maybe even me, finally learned that love isn't something you take back when you're angry. It's something you grow through, even when it hurts. Final update. It's been just over a year since everything ended between Brandon and me, and I can honestly say I'm in a completely different place. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. The version of me who wrote that last update feels like a ghost now. Familiar, but distant. After he came to pick up the rest of his stuff, things stayed quiet for a long time. No contact, no awkward texts, no hope you're doing well messages, just space. I needed it. And looking back, I think he did too. I kept seeing Karen, my therapist, for a few more months. She helped me unpack the emotional patterns I'd fallen into. Not just with Brandon, but throughout my life, I had always been a fixer. The girl who stayed calm, who made things work, who took responsibility even when it wasn't hers. She said something that stuck with me. You can't build safety in a relationship by constantly being the one who absorbs the pain. That sentence changed the way I see everything. Around March, I took a big step and moved into a small one-bedroom apartment downtown. It's nothing fancy. Creaky floors, an ancient stove, a window that sticks. But it's mine. Every inch of it feels earned. The first night I slept there, alone, I remember hearing the hum of the city outside and thinking, I did this. I'm okay. Work has been going well too. I finally went for a promotion I'd been avoiding for years because I didn't want to rock the boat. I got it. It's been stressful, but I feel proud of myself in a way I never used to. For once, my energy goes into building me, not patching someone else. Then out of nowhere, in late spring, Brandon texted me. It was short. Hey Liv, hope you're doing okay. I wanted to tell you something. Can we talk? I stared at it for a long time. My heart didn't jump the way it used to. It just steadied. I agreed to meet him for coffee, the same place where we'd met months earlier. When I walked in, he was already there. This time smiling. Genuinely, he looked healthier, calmer. We hugged briefly, and it wasn't charged. It wasn't awkward, just familiar. He told me he'd been in therapy consistently since we last spoke, that he'd learned how to sit with discomfort instead of trying to control it, that he realized how much of our relationship had been built on fear. Fear of losing, fear of failing, fear of being wrong. He said, I didn't deserve you then, and I don't want to mess up whatever peace you found now. But I wanted to tell you I'm grateful. You leaving woke me up. I didn't know what to say for a second. I just looked at him and said, thank you. I'm grateful too. We talked for about an hour. No tears, no promises, no talk of getting back together. Just two people acknowledging what they shared and what they learned. When we said goodbye, I knew it was final. But in the best way possible. He's dating someone new now, apparently. He mentioned it briefly, and surprisingly, it didn't hurt. I was happy for him, because we both got to grow into the people we should have been for each other. Just too late. As for me, I've been seeing someone too. His name's Jacob. We met at a friend's birthday dinner over the summer. He's gentle in a way that feels completely foreign to me. Not performatively nice, but patient. The first time we disagreed about something, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't try to win. He just listened. It actually threw me off. I remember thinking, is this what healthy feels like? He knows about Brandon, not all the details, but enough. And instead of judging me or making it awkward, he said, it sounds like you've done a lot of work to know what you need now. That meant everything. The other night we were making dinner, pasta. A little too much wine, music playing in the background, and he said, "You've got this calm energy about you. Like you've survived something and decided to choose peace instead of bitterness." And I realized that's exactly it, because for the longest time, I thought closure would come from some big conversation, or an apology, or finally being proven right, but it didn't. Closure came from choosing myself. Quietly, consistently, every day since that night I kicked Brandon out. I still have the engagement ring. I keep it in a small jewelry box on my dresser. Sometimes I see it when I'm getting ready for work, and I don't feel anger or sadness. I just feel gratitude. Because that ring, that argument, that whole messy ending, was the beginning of me finally growing into someone I actually like. Brandon and I don't talk anymore, and I think that's how it's meant to be. We were each other's catalysts, not conclusions. Karen once told me that healing doesn't mean you erase the old version of yourself. It means you integrate her. The scared girl who begged to be understood still lives somewhere inside me, but now she has someone older and calmer to hold her hand. If there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that love isn't supposed to test your sanity. It's supposed to ground you, and when it doesn't, you're allowed to walk away, even if it breaks your heart. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is end something before it destroys both of you. And for me, that's what this whole year has been. The slow, quiet realization that walking away wasn't a failure. It was the first time I actually chose myself. Stories number 5, the dinner that ended everything, okay? So this happened a few weeks ago, but it's been living rent-free in my head ever since. I honestly can't tell if I was petty or just defending myself either way. I haven't been able to stop replaying the night, mostly because it went from slightly awkward to catastrophically embarrassing in the span of about 5 hours. I 26F met this guy, Logan 28M, through mutual friends at a rooftop party earlier this year. He's the kind of guy who talks like he's used to people listening. Confident, a little cocky, but charming enough that you don't really mind at first. He works in marketing, drives a shiny gray Tesla, and has this half-smile that makes you think he's about to say something clever. We flirted that night, swapped numbers, and texted on and off for a few weeks. He wasn't super consistent, but when he did text, he was funny and flirty. Eventually, he asked me out to dinner at this farm-to-table place downtown that he said was his spot. I was actually excited. It had been a while since I'd been on a proper date. The night started off fine, the restaurant was nice, low lighting, too many mason jars, the usual. He looked great, black button-up, that faint cologne that makes you think he planned this. We ordered drinks, and conversation flowed easily enough. We talked about our jobs, music, travel. I noticed early on that he liked to talk about himself a lot. But again, I brushed it off as nerves. Then came the first red flag. When the waiter came to take our order, I asked for the chicken with lemon risotto, and he looked at me and said, "Oh, you're not one of those salad-only girls?" "I like that." I laughed awkwardly because I thought he was joking. But then he added, "Most women I go out with are, watching their figure. I should have left then. But I didn't. I told myself he was just socially clumsy." He ordered the bison steak, medium rare, and then started giving me unsolicited opinions about clean eating. Like, he literally started explaining macros to me between bites of bread. And I work in nutrition consulting. "I do this for a living," I corrected him gently at first. But he brushed it off, saying, "Oh, I've read a lot about it. I've been really into this carnivore thing lately. You'd be surprised what carbs do to your gut." Oh, I would be surprised, Logan, just not in the way he thought. Dinner went on like that, him talking over me, making little jokes that landed somewhere between mildly sexist and full-blown, "Please stop talking." At one point, I said I grew up in a small town, and he smirked and said, "That explains the wholesome vibe. Bet you were the teacher's pet." I asked him what he meant by that, and he said, "You just seem like the kind of girl who'd never get her hands dirty." Now, I don't know what possessed me, but I decided to prove him wrong. I told him I used to help my dad clean out the barn, that I grew up on a farm, that I've probably shoveled more literal cow crap than he's ever seen in his life. He laughed, but not in a good way. "You? No offense, but you look way too polished to be a barn girl. You're like, city clean, the kind that'd panic if she chipped a nail." That's when he called me a soiled brat. I blinked. "Sorry, what?" He shrugged, sipping his drink like it was casual conversation. Like spoiled, but with dirt, soiled. You're trying to sound all tough farm girl, but come on. You're a brunch and skincare type. I felt my stomach tighten. I wasn't sure if it was anger or the heavy, oily sauce from the risotto. Probably both, the rest of the night. I was quiet, I smiled, nodded, played nice, but I knew I was done. I mentally checked out, already planning my Uber home. When the check came, he didn't even reach for it. He just said, "We can split, right? Equality and all that, fine, whatever." I paid my half and got out of there. But here's where the universe decided to turn my humiliation into something poetic. About an hour after I got home, my stomach started twisting like it was auditioning for a horror movie. I'll spare the details, but let's just say that chicken risotto had a personal vendetta against me. I spent the rest of the night becoming intimately acquainted with my bathroom. The next morning, I texted my group chat we call ourselves the Brunch Coven to tell them about the date. My best friend Carly immediately said, "Oh my God, that Logan? He gave me ick vibes when I met him at Maddie's party." We laughed about it, and I told them about my late-night digestive nightmare. Carly, being Carly, said, "Honestly, that's karma. Your body was rejecting him and his food." Fast forward a few days. Logan texted me out of nowhere. "Hey, had fun the other night. You're cute. Next time we should grab sushi. Next time?" I could barely keep water down after that date. I wasn't going to reply. But I was still annoyed about the soiled brat comment, so I said, "Appreciate the offer, but I think your favorite restaurant and I aren't compatible." Spent the night bonding with my toilet after that risotto, he sent back. Wow, TMI, guess some girls just can't handle real food. That did it. The sheer arrogance of that message flipped a switch in me. I screenshotted the conversation and sent it to my friends. Then I said something like, "If he ever asks about me, just tell him his real food gave me real results." We all laughed, moved on, until the following weekend when I ran into him again. At another mutual friend's party, he came up to me with that same smug smirk and said, "So, diarrhea jokes? Really classy." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, so you heard?" "Yeah," he said. "Carly thought it was hilarious, real mature, telling people about your bowel movements." I smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, don't flatter yourself, Logan. I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about the restaurant. You just happened to be the side dish." The look on his face was priceless. Somewhere between insulted and confused. I thought that would be the end of it, but apparently, he'd been telling people I embarrassed him, that I was immature and vindictive. A few mutuals reached out, asking what actually happened, and I just told the truth, that he insulted me, called me soiled, and I got food poisoning. Most of them laughed. A few said he kind of deserved it, but then Logan DM'd me again. This long, dramatic paragraph about how I'd ruined his reputation and how he doesn't date immature girls. I didn't even bother replying. I just blocked him. A week later, Carly texted me a screenshot of his Instagram story. A selfie of him eating steak with the caption, "Real men eat real food, weak stomachs need not apply." I laughed so hard I nearly cried. So yeah, maybe I overshared a little. Maybe I shouldn't have told my friends about my post-date gastrointestinal apocalypse. But honestly, if the worst thing I did was tell a few people that an arrogant guy's favorite restaurant made me sick after he insulted me, I can live with that. He called me a soiled brat. I just made sure the universe returned the favor. Emphasis on soiled. And in the end, I got the last laugh, because every time someone brings up Logan now, they don't talk about his car or his job or his gym routine. They talk about how his date got food poisoning after dinner with him. If that's my legacy with him, I'm perfectly okay with it. A few weeks later, I thought the whole thing had finally died down. Life went back to normal. I was busy with work, hanging out with my friends, and trying to erase the memory of Logan's smug smirk from my brain. But of course this is real life, not a clean Netflix episode. Drama has a way of resurfacing just when you think it's over. It started when Carly texted me a screenshot from someone's Instagram story. It was Logan again. Apparently, he'd decided to rebrand himself as some kind of dating expert. He'd been posting long captions about high-value women and modern dating standards, complete with black and white photos of him drinking espresso or looking out a window like a deep thinker. I almost choked on my coffee when I saw one of his captions. Some people can't handle honesty. When you point out immaturity, they try to drag you down to their level. "Stay classy, kings," Carly wrote under it. "Girl, this man is subtweeting your digestive tract." I laughed so hard I had to set my phone down. But beneath the laughter was this weird flicker of annoyance. Not because I cared what he thought, but because he was still trying to spin it, like he was the victim of some grand social injustice involving my stomach. Then came the real kicker, 2 Fridays later. My friend group met up for drinks at a rooftop bar downtown. It was one of those perfect spring evenings. Warm breeze, string lights overhead, that faint smell of grilled food floating in the air. I was just starting to relax when Carly leaned over and whispered, don't freak out, but Logan's here." I turned, and there he was, sitting at a table across the patio with a few guys I vaguely recognized, all of them wearing the same uniform of too tight shirts and self-importance. I almost laughed. What were the odds? Carly smirked. "He hasn't seen you yet. Want to bail?" I thought about it for a second. Then I said, "Nope. I'm done running from bad meals and worse men." About half an hour later, Logan noticed me. I saw his face freeze mid-laugh before he whispered something to one of his friends. They all turned to look. I just smiled and raised my glass. Apparently, that set him off. He got up, straightened his shirt, and walked over like he was about to deliver a TED Talk. "Hey," he said, voice dripping with fake casual. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Same," I said, sipping my drink. "How's your gut health?" He blinked. "Funny," Carly snorted into her mojito. He leaned against the railing like he owned the place. "You know, people are still talking about that little story you told. Kind of messed up, don't you think?" I tilted my head. "Which part? The one where you called me a soiled brat? Or the part where I almost died of food poisoning?" He smirked. "You really can't take a joke, can you? No wonder you're still single." That one stung. Not because it was true, but because of how confidently he said it. Like he thought he was landing some final, devastating blow before I could even reply. Carly leaned in and said, "Actually, she's not single. She's dating someone who doesn't mistake misogyny for humor." I wasn't dating anyone, but bless Carly for that. Logan laughed like it didn't bother him, but his ears went red. "Whatever. Just don't tell your little friends I gave him diarrhea too." I smiled sweetly and said, "Oh, don't worry. You're the only man who's ever made me that sick." He froze, jaw tight, and then just walked off without another word. His friends didn't look too amused either. One of them even gave me a thumbs up on his way out. That would have been the end of it. But a few days later, I got a message from one of those friends, a guy named Jake. "Hey, just wanted to say sorry for how Logan acted. We told him to drop it weeks ago." "You were right. He was being a jerk." I didn't reply, but I appreciated it. Then 2 nights later, something wild happened. Someone definitely not me. Definitely Carly sent Logan's old Instagram soiled brat quote posts to a local meme page that loves roasting pretentious Austin guys. They turned his caption into a viral meme with the text, "When you call her a soiled brat but you're the one full of crap." Within a day, it had thousands of likes and comments. People from our social circle were sharing it. Even Maddie, the mutual friend who'd introduced us, texted me laughing. "He's furious," she wrote. "Says he's deleting his account." And sure enough, 2 days later, and poof, the dating guru Logan era vanished. I wish I could say I felt guilty, but honestly, I didn't. He humiliated me, talked down to me, then tried to rewrite the story like I was the problem. Maybe public mockery wasn't the mature solution, but damn if it didn't feel like poetic justice. Since then, life's been blissfully drama-free. I started seeing someone new. A guy named Alex who I met through work. He's funny, kind, and best of all, doesn't lecture me about macros or call me farm-related insults. He even jokes about the whole thing now. The first time we ordered takeout together, he grinned and said, "Just promise me this won't end with you texting your friends from the bathroom." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the food. Sometimes I still get messages from people who heard the story secondhand. Apparently it's become a kind of local cautionary tale about dating egos and gastrointestinal karma. And honestly, I'm fine with that, 'cause here's what I've learned. People who humiliate others always end up exposing themselves. You don't have to ruin them. They'll do it for you. All you have to do is survive, heal, and occasionally laugh about it with your friends over mimosas. So yeah, maybe I wasn't the classiest, maybe I could have stayed quiet, but if the universe decides to balance arrogance with a little poetic indigestion, who am I to interfere? Besides, every time someone says, "Hey, remember that guy who called a girl a soiled brat?" They don't remember him, they remember me, and my stomach still wins that fight. It's been just over a year since the Great Diarrhea Debacle, as Carly still jokingly calls it. And honestly, I didn't think I'd ever talk about it again. Life moved on, I moved on, and Logan vanished from the radar completely. But then last weekend happened, and apparently karma wasn't quite done with either of us. Alex and I have been together for almost 11 months now. Things are good. Easy in a way I didn't think relationships could be. We just get each other, He's calm where I'm reactive, grounded where I tend to spiral. We've met each other's families, gone on 2 trips together, and I've even started leaving a toothbrush at his place. It's that kind of peaceful stage where love doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like exhaling. Anyway, my company hosted a charity gala downtown last Saturday. One of those semi-formal events with overpriced appetizers and too many people pretending to enjoy jazz. I was helping organize it, so I was running around greeting donors, keeping things on schedule, and making sure the wine didn't run out before dessert. Alex came as my +1. He looked stupidly handsome in a navy suit, and we were having a pretty great night, until I saw him, Logan, I swear. I almost dropped my champagne glass. He was across the room, chatting with some guy from another firm, dressed in the kind of suit you rent, not own. His hair was shorter, and he'd grown one of those beards that scream. I'm still finding myself. For a second, I thought maybe he wouldn't notice me. But of course, fate's never that kind. His eyes landed on me mid-laugh and his expression froze. I could almost see the moment recognition clicked. I muttered, "Oh, for the love of fiber." Alex followed my gaze and frowned. "That him?" I sighed. "Yep, the infamous Logan," Alex grinned. "He doesn't look like a guru anymore." "He looks like the kind of guy who sells protein powder out of his trunk," I whispered. Alex tried not to laugh, and I went back to mingling, pretending I didn't feel the weight of Logan's stare from across the room. But later that night, as the event wound down and people started leaving, he approached me. "Hey," he said awkwardly, standing just close enough that I could smell whatever cologne he was wearing. "Still too strong. Didn't think I'd see you here?" "Same," I said flatly. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Listen, I owe you an apology." I blinked. "That I didn't expect." He kept talking. "I was an idiot back then, immature. I shouldn't have said what I said. Or made that post. I lost some friends over it. It was a rough time." For a second, I just looked at him. He wasn't smirking or posturing. He looked tired, maybe even embarrassed. His eyes flicked toward Alex, who had stepped away to grab our coats but was watching carefully from a distance. "I appreciate you saying that," I said finally. "It was a crappy thing to do, literally." He huffed a laugh. "Guess I deserve that." "Yeah," I said. "You did," he nodded. "Anyway, I hope you're doing well. You look happy." "I am," I said simply. Then, as if on cue, Alex came back and wrapped an arm around my waist. "Everything good here?" Logan smiled weakly. "Yeah, man. Just catching up." He turned to me again. "Take care, all right?" And that was it. He walked away, and no smugness, no bitterness, just a quiet, almost defeated look. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Carly with a link to a Facebook post. It was Logan again. But this time, it wasn't a cryptic self-help rant, it was a long, surprisingly sincere post about growing up, learning humility, and taking accountability. He mentioned, vaguely, that he'd once hurt someone with words, and that he hoped she knew he was sorry. Carly texted me, "Okay, character development," and weirdly, I felt at peace. Maybe it's cheesy, but I realized that sometimes the real revenge isn't public humiliation or internet memes. It's becoming so secure in your own life that you don't even flinch when someone from your past shows up again. Later that week, Alex and I went out to dinner, Thai food. My favorite. As I laughed over my pad CU, I remembered that awful first date with Logan and how small I'd felt sitting across from someone who made me question my worth. Then I looked at Alex, the way he listened when I talked, the way he smiled when I teased him, and realized I'd built an entirely different world since then. Before bed, I scrolled back through some old messages, found that group chat with Carly and Maddie from the night I told them about the incident, and sent one final message. "Closure achieved, no more stomach drama, emotional or otherwise," Carly replied with a string of emoji. And Maddie just wrote, "A legend's bow." And maybe it sounds silly, but I really did feel like I'd come full circle because once upon a time, I was humiliated by a man who thought cruelty was confidence. Now I'm happy, healthy, and with someone who actually makes me feel safe, both emotionally and digestively. Sometimes I still get tagged in memes referencing soiled brat girl. It doesn't bother me anymore. If anything, I laugh, because if a ridiculous story about a bad date and worse stomach luck made even one other woman feel less ashamed about standing up for herself, I'll take it. So yeah, a year later, everything's good. The villain found a little redemption, the memes died down, I got closure. And the next time anyone asks what I learned from it all, I'll tell them this. Never apologize for having a body that reacts, emotions that defend you, or friends who go nuclear when you're disrespected. Oh. And always check Yelp reviews before ordering the shrimp risotto. Stories number 6. My easiest weddings are always the gay ones. I've been a wedding photographer for 25 years. When I say I've seen it all, I mean it. Bridezillas, drunk uncles, fistfights between cousins, and a groom who once got so hammered he fell face first into the cake before the first dance. You name it, I've probably snapped a picture of it, but one pattern became so clear over the years that I started joking about it to my assistant, Megan. Every time we saw a same-sex couple on our booking calendar, especially two men, we knew we were in for a smooth, respectful, almost serene workday. No chaos, no tantrums. No power struggles disguised as creative vision. Just calm, happy people who wanted to celebrate. Meanwhile, I've had straight weddings where I was ready to fake a memory card failure just to go home early. The first time I noticed the difference was back in 2003. I was photographing a big outdoor wedding at a winery in upstate New York. The bride, Lauren, was furious because her sister wore the same shade of off-white shoes she had. She threw her bouquet at the poor girl during portraits. I caught the moment in a candid shot that looks funny now. But at the time, it was like standing between warring armies. Later that year, I shot my first gay wedding, two men named Michael and Grant, and it was completely different. They were kind, patient, and made sure every vendor got fed. No one yelled, no one cried. It was the first wedding where I didn't go home with a migraine. As the years went by, the pattern stayed consistent. Every straight wedding seemed to have at least one person trying to prove something. Whether it was the bride's family controlling the budget, or the groom's friends turning the reception into a frat party. But with gay weddings, there was this sense of gratitude, like everyone in the room actually wanted to be there. A few years ago, I was photographing two women, Allison and Kate, in Vermont. The ceremony was held under these tall maple trees, and everything was covered in soft yellow leaves. Before the ceremony, they both got ready in the same cabin, but stayed on opposite sides of the room, giggling like teenagers. When they finally saw each other in their dresses, they both cried so hard I had to step out to keep from tearing up myself. It was genuine, grounded joy, no performance. Then compare that to a wedding I shot later that same summer. A straight couple named Brent and Chloe. From the first meeting, I could tell it was going to be a nightmare. Chloe treated Brent like an assistant instead of a partner. She barked orders at everyone, yelled at the florist, and when her mom tried to fix her veil, she snapped, "Don't touch me, you'll wrinkle it." During the cake cutting, she smashed a fistful of frosting into Brent's face so hard that he stumbled backward. Everyone laughed except him. I caught his expression in that exact second. Humiliation mixed with something like regret. That picture never made it into their album. I've asked myself so many times why this pattern exists. Part of it, I think, is that straight weddings often carry a ton of social baggage, family expectations, gender roles. That unspoken bride is the star dynamic that turns the groom into an accessory. When people are under that much pressure to live up to a fantasy, things crack. I've seen brides break down because the napkins weren't folded right, or because their cousin's baby cried during the vows. Gay weddings, on the other hand, feel freer. Most of those couples had to fight just to have the right to get married at all. By the time their wedding day comes, it's less about performance and more about celebration. It's not the most important day of a woman's life. It's the day we finally get to stand up and say we made it. There was one wedding I'll never forget. Two men named Jeremy and Alex in Chicago. They'd been together for 19 years and waited until marriage equality became legal to tie the knot. The ceremony was simple, small rooftop venue, about 50 guests, lots of candles. When they exchanged vows, Jeremy's voice broke halfway through. He said, "I spent half my life thinking this day wasn't possible. I still can't believe I get to say you're my husband," every vendor cried. Even the DJ. The reception was relaxed and filled with laughter. No one complained about seating arrangements or the playlist. At the end of the night, when I thanked them and started packing up, Alex handed me a glass of champagne and said, "Sit down for a minute. You've been working hard." We sat together and watched their friends dancing barefoot under string lights, and I remember thinking, this is what a wedding should feel like. That doesn't mean gay weddings are perfect, of course. I've seen some wild ones. There was a lesbian couple whose moms hated each other so much they refused to stand in the same photo, and one guy who got so nervous during vows he accidentally called his husband by his ex's name. The crowd howled. But even then, the energy stayed kind. Nobody weaponized embarrassment. Megan, my assistant, summed it up best one night after we got back from another smooth, joyful gay wedding. We were unloading gear and she said, "It's because they know how to communicate. Straight couples plan weddings for other people. Gay couples plan them for each other." That stuck with me. These days, I mostly take on referrals and smaller jobs. I'm not chasing the big fancy events anymore, but every time I get an inquiry from a same-sex couple, I find myself smiling before I even open the message. I know it'll be a day filled with love, laughter, and probably a good playlist. Just last month, I shot a small backyard wedding for two men named Aaron and Blake. They had tacos, a string quartet, and a dozen close friends at the end of the night, instead of a dramatic send-off. Everyone just sat around a fire pit, eating s'mores and telling stories. No pressure, no chaos, just warmth. When I packed up to leave, Aaron hugged me and said, "Thanks for seeing us." It hit me harder than I expected. Because that's the thing. I've spent my whole career watching people try to be seen, trying to perform love instead of live it. But with couples like them, I didn't have to pose anything. The love was already there, unfiltered and real. I guess that's why, after hundreds of weddings, my answer to why gay ones are easier isn't really about logistics or drama. It's because those couples show up already knowing who they are. They've done the hard part before they ever walk down the aisle. Update: it's been about a year since I wrote that, and I didn't expect the post to blow up like it did. I got hundreds of messages from people in the wedding industry. Planners, DJs, florists, caterers, all saying the same thing. You're not wrong. It was oddly comforting to know I wasn't imagining the pattern. The post even got shared in a few wedding professional groups on Facebook, where people were having long, thoughtful discussions about it. Some folks pushed back too, saying I was romanticizing gay weddings or generalizing straight ones. And honestly, I get that. Of course not all straight weddings are chaotic, and not all same-sex weddings are perfectly serene. But I think what people resonated with wasn't the comparison itself. It was what it revealed about expectations. After that post, I started paying closer attention. I took fewer weddings overall and started being more intentional with the couples I accepted. I began asking different questions during consultations. What matters most to you about your wedding day? Or what do you want your guests to feel when they leave? You can tell everything you need to know from those answers. If someone says, "I want everyone to see how amazing the decorations are," that's usually a red flag for me now. It means they're thinking about optics, not experience. But when a couple says something like, "We just want everyone to feel relaxed and loved," I know it's going to be a good day. There was a wedding I shot a few months ago, straight couple, Emma and Ryan, and they completely changed how I thought about drama-free weddings. They had read my original post and actually reached out because of it. During our first meeting, Emma laughed and said, "We're determined not to be one of those weddings." And they weren't. Their wedding was genuine and easy. Ryan made breakfast for everyone that morning. Emma wore sneakers under her dress. There was no bride is the center of the universe vibe. No tension between families, no performative traditions they didn't care about. When the reception started, Ryan's dad got up and said, "I've never seen two people make marriage look this simple." And I remember thinking, this is what happens when people get married for themselves, not for the audience. After that, I started noticing something deeper. The calm weddings, gay or straight, all had a few things in common. Equality, communication, gratitude, and realistic expectations. The chaotic ones almost always had a power imbalance somewhere. Someone trying to prove a point, someone trying to control everything, someone feeling unheard. I've also done a few more same-sex weddings this year, and each one reminded me why I love this job. One that stands out was two older women, Carol and Denise, who had been together for 32 years. They met in the 80s, back when being out was dangerous in most places. They finally got married in their backyard surrounded by their grown kids and a handful of lifelong friends. When they exchanged vows, Carol said, "We outlived the shame. We outlived the hiding. We made it, I swear." I could feel every single person in that yard holding their breath. It wasn't a Pinterest-perfect wedding. The dog barked during the ceremony, and one of the candles blew out. But it didn't matter. It was perfect for them. And maybe that's what I've been learning through all of this. The peaceful weddings aren't peaceful because they're gay or straight. They're peaceful because they're authentic. The couples who go into marriage with mutual respect and communication create the kind of energy that radiates out to everyone involved. I've been photographing fewer weddings lately, partly because I've started mentoring younger photographers. A lot of them ask me, How do you know when a wedding's going to be stressful? And I always tell them the same thing. You can tell by how the couple treats each other during the first meeting. If one person keeps interrupting the other, or rolls their eyes, or only talks about aesthetics, brace yourself. But if they laugh, finish each other's sentences, and ask you how your day's going, you're probably in for a smooth ride. What I didn't expect was how this job, after all these years, would teach me so much about human connection. Weddings aren't really about perfection. They're about how people show up for each other when everything doesn't go exactly as planned. I got an email recently from Jeremy and Alex, the Chicago couple from my earlier post. They just celebrated their first anniversary and wanted to send me a photo. They looked exactly the same, still smiling, still radiating that quiet, content energy. In their message they wrote, "You told our story in a way that made us feel seen. Thank you for noticing." That line stuck with me more than any review or tip I've ever received. Because at the end of the day, I think that's all most people want. To be seen for who they are, not for the roles they're supposed to play. And maybe that's the real secret behind why gay weddings have always felt easier. There's no pretending, no outdated script. Just two people showing up as themselves and saying, "This is us." If more weddings, gay, straight, whatever, were built on that, I think a lot fewer cakes would end up flying across the room. Final update. It's been 3 more years since that last update. And in that time, my career, my perspective, and honestly, my sense of peace have all shifted in ways I didn't see coming. I've semi-retired now. No more back-to-back weekend bookings or 12-hour editing marathons. These days, I take maybe a handful of weddings each year, mostly by referral or because I just click with the couple. I've learned to say no to jobs that feel like emotional landmines. When I wrote that first post, I didn't realize how deeply it would resonate, not just with other wedding vendors, but with people outside the industry. I still get the occasional message from someone saying, "Your story made me rethink what kind of wedding I want." I think that's the highest compliment anyone in my line of work could get. The biggest shift, though, has been personal. For decades, I stood behind the camera watching people start new chapters. I saw joy, nerves, awkwardness, love, and sometimes regret flicker across their faces in seconds. It was beautiful and exhausting. But after years of watching others build lives together, I realized I'd never actually slowed down long enough to build my own. Around 2 years ago, I met someone, Daniel. He's a florist, actually. We met at a small wedding up in Maine where we were both working. The day was gray and drizzly, the kind of weather brides usually panic over. But the couple, a quiet lesbian pair named Brooke and Jamie, didn't care one bit. They laughed, danced in the mist, and made the kind of memories you don't need sunlight for. Daniel and I ended up chatting while packing up our gear. He had this calm energy that I wasn't used to. No pretense, no chatter, just warmth. We got coffee a week later, then dinner. We've been together ever since. Being with him has changed how I see the work I've done all these years. He's helped me understand that what I admired so much in those drama-free weddings wasn't just composure. It was emotional maturity. The ability to love without performing it for everyone else. That's what I'd been searching for in my own life, and I didn't even know it. Daniel and I started doing a few weddings together, me shooting, him handling the florals. One of our favorite gigs was a backyard wedding for 2 men, both in their 60s, who'd been together since the early 90s. Their ceremony was held under a massive oak tree, and instead of chairs, everyone sat on picnic blankets. Halfway through the vows, the officiant stopped because one of the grooms had started crying too hard to speak. The guests laughed gently, and his partner reached out, wiped his tears and said, "Take your time. We've waited 30 years for this." There wasn't a dry eye in the yard. Moments like that remind me why I never burned out, despite all the long days and unpredictable clients. Love like that doesn't need choreography. It just exists. And when you're lucky enough to witness it, you carry it with you. I also started teaching photography workshops over the last year. Mostly to young women and LGBTQ+ photographers who want to enter the wedding business. I tell them everything I wish someone had told me. How to set boundaries with clients, how to recognize red flags, how to protect their creative energy. But I also tell them this. You're not just capturing a day, you're preserving a truth. One student asked me once, "Do you ever get emotional behind the camera?" And I laughed. Every damn time. I've cried behind a lens more times than I can count. Especially lately, it's not sadness, it's gratitude. Because when you've been around this many love stories, you start realizing that joy isn't about perfection, it's about presence. Last summer, Daniel and I went to a wedding where we weren't working, just guests. It was for two of our friends, a straight couple who built their relationship on communication and mutual respect. Watching them exchange vows felt like seeing everything I'd ever written about come full circle. There was no spectacle, no audience-pleasing moments, just two people promising to keep choosing each other. As the sun set, Daniel leaned over and said, "You know, you've spent your whole life photographing love stories. It's kind of beautiful that now you get to live one." He was right. I still think about those years of chaos. The screaming brides, the drunk groomsmen, the endless posing. But now, they feel like lessons. I learned patience from those days, and perspective from the ones that came after. I learned that love that feels easy doesn't mean it's shallow. It just means both people are working from the same foundation. Sometimes people ask me if I'll ever write a book about all this. Maybe I will, not a gossip-filled memoir, but something honest. About what weddings can teach us about humanity. About how the people who come to the altar already knowing themselves tend to walk away happier. If I do, I think I'll dedicate it to all the couples who proved that love doesn't need to be loud to be real. As for me and Daniel, we've talked about getting married someday. Not because we need a big event, but because it would be nice to make it official in front of the few people who've stood by us. And when that day comes, it won't be fancy. Probably just our backyard, some flowers, and a handful of friends. No cake throwing, no power plays, no performance. Just us. Quiet, grounded, and grateful. And if someone else happens to be behind the camera that day, I hope they'll look through their lens and think, yeah, this is what love looks like. Stories number 7. He asked if he could have a girlfriend on the side. I've been with my husband Mark for 18 years. Married for 16. We met when I was 20, he was 21, in college, back then. He was charming in that messy, boyish way, always making people laugh, never taking things too seriously. I was drawn to that energy, because I've always been more reserved. We balanced each other. Or at least, that's what I told myself. For years we were happy real. Deep kind of happy, not perfect. Not without fights, but solid. We built a life together. We bought a modest house in North Carolina, raised 2 kids now teens, went through job losses, illnesses, and all the everyday chaos of marriage. There was trust. Or at least I thought there was. It started about 6 months ago. Mark had been acting different, not suspicious at first, just distant. He was on his phone more, but also quieter, almost melancholy sometimes. When I asked if something was wrong, he'd just shrug and say, "Just tired. Work's been rough." Then one night after the kids went to bed, he poured himself a glass of whiskey, which he almost never does, and asked if we could talk. When someone says that after almost 2 decades of marriage, your stomach drops instantly. He sat across from me at the kitchen table, looked nervous, and said, "I love you, Sarah. You know that, right?" I nodded, already bracing for something. Then he said, "I think I need something more. Not instead of you. Just different. I've been reading about open marriages and I swear my mind blanked out for a second. I said, "Wait, are you saying you want to sleep with other people?" He hesitated, then said, "I'm saying I want the freedom to connect with someone else. Maybe emotionally, maybe physically. I don't want to leave you. I just think we've grown apart, and maybe this could help us both figure out what we need." It felt like the air left the room. I asked if there was someone already. He swore there wasn't. That it was just an idea he'd been thinking about for months. He said he'd even talked to a therapist about it, though apparently not our couple's one. The words kept echoing in my head. A girlfriend on the side. I asked him point blank, would I get the same freedom? He said, "Of course I don't want to control you. I just want honesty." That made it worse somehow. The thought of me with someone else made me sick. Not because I'm a prude, but because that's not what I signed up for. I married a man who wanted to build a family, not explore connections. I told him I needed time. He agreed, said he didn't want to pressure me. Then he kissed my forehead and went to bed. I stayed up until 3 a.m., just staring at the wall, trying to process what my life had just turned into. The next few weeks were awkward. We tried to act normal around the kids. He made dinner, mowed the lawn, watched Netflix with me. But there was this invisible line between us, like we were both standing on opposite sides of something we couldn't cross. I started reading online about open marriages. Some people swore it saved their relationships. Others said it destroyed them. I found myself trying to rationalize it. Maybe he's just going through a midlife crisis. Maybe he's scared of getting older. Then one night, while he was in the shower, His phone buzzed. Normally I don't look. But something in me, that gut feeling, made me check. It was a text from someone named Jenna. The message said, "I've been thinking about our conversation. I'm not sure how to feel about it either. But I do miss talking to you." My heart sank when he came out. I didn't even try to hide it. I asked, "Who's Jenna?" He froze, then sighed. "She's a friend from the gym. We've been talking." "Nothing's happened." I asked how long. He said, "A few months." So, while he was thinking about having a girlfriend, he'd already been emotionally involved with one. I told him that was cheating, even if nothing physical had happened. He said, "It's not like that, Sarah. I didn't mean for it to get emotional. I just feel like she gets me in ways you don't anymore." That broke me more than anything else. "We fought," I yelled, which I rarely do. I told him he'd humiliated me, that after 18 years, the least he owed me was honesty. He said I was being honest. "I came to you first before doing anything." That twisted logic made me want to scream. For the next month, we tried trial separation. He stayed at a friend's apartment during the week. Came home on weekends for the kids. Every Sunday night when he left, I cried in the bathroom so they wouldn't hear me. Our daughter Emma asked one night, "Are you and Dad getting divorced?" She's 15, too smart to believe our just need space line. I didn't know what to say. I told her we were trying to figure things out. But deep down, I knew when he called one night and said, "I'm meeting Jenna for dinner to talk things through." He phrased it like it was innocent, but I could hear it in his voice. That tenderness, that newness. The next morning, I packed his things into boxes. I left his wedding ring on top. When he came home, I told him it was over. He begged me to reconsider, said he still loved me, that he didn't mean for it to go this far. I told him he'd already crossed every line that mattered. It's been 3 months since then. The divorce papers are being processed. The kids split time between us. I'm in therapy now. Real therapy. Not just surviving on autopilot. Mark is apparently still seeing Jenna. They post photos on social media. Hiking, brunch, all the usual new couple stuff. It hurts, but less than I expected. Because now, when I look at him, I don't see the man I married. I see a stranger who wanted the comfort of a wife and the excitement of a girlfriend. And I realize how small I'd started making myself to fit into his world. People keep telling me I'm strong. I don't feel strong. I feel tired, raw, rebuilding from the inside out. But I also feel free. Free from the waiting, the guessing, the constant emotional negotiations. I still believe in love. But I've learned that commitment isn't about ownership. It's about choice. And once someone starts looking elsewhere, that choice has already been made. So no, he shouldn't have had a girlfriend on the side. And I shouldn't have had to ask myself if that question even made sense in the first place. It's been almost 9 months since everything happened. Since I packed Mark's things, handed him his ring, and finally decided I was done. 9 months doesn't sound like much time for a marriage that lasted 18 years. But it feels like I've lived another lifetime since that night. The first few months were brutal. Divorce isn't just paperwork and logistics. It's grief, confusion, and a constant tug-of-war between nostalgia and anger. There were nights I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and instinctively reach for the space beside me, only to find cold sheets. I'd stare at the ceiling and replay every conversation, every choice, wondering where exactly we went wrong. But then I realized something. I was mourning the idea of us, not the reality, because the truth was, Mark hadn't been my partner for a long time before he ever said the word girlfriend. The kids adjusted faster than I did. Emma turned 16 last month, and she's sharper. More self-aware than I ever was at her age. She told me, "Mom, I'm proud of you." That hit me harder than I expected. I asked why, and she said, "Because you didn't let Dad treat you like an option." I had to step into this version of myself I didn't know existed. The one who sets boundaries, who doesn't apologize for having needs, who can admit when something's broken without immediately trying to fix it. Mark and I still see each other, obviously because of the kids. The first few exchanges were tense. He'd try small talk. "How's work? Did you get the car fixed?" And I'd give short answers just to keep things civil. Over time, that weird edge faded into something resembling neutrality. He's still with Jenna. I know because Emma saw them together once when she was out with friends. She said, "It's weird seeing Dad with someone else, but he seems happy, I guess." I nodded, told her it's okay to feel weird about it. Inside, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. I ran into him a few weeks ago at a grocery store. He looked thinner, more tired. We stood there in the canned goods aisle, like two strangers who shared an entire lifetime. but didn't quite know how to greet each other anymore. He smiled and said, "Hey Sarah, you look good." I said, "Thanks. You too." We talked for maybe 5 minutes, about the kids, about work. He said he'd been thinking about everything, and that he was sorry again. Not just for Jenna, he said, but for how I handled us. I was selfish, I didn't respond right away. I just said, "I know, I was scared too, but I didn't look for someone else to fix it." He nodded, eyes down. "I know." There was this moment, quiet, almost peaceful, where I realized I wasn't angry anymore. I didn't want him back. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted to move forward. When I got home that night, I looked around my house, the one I'd redecorated, repainted, and slowly made mine again. I realized how different it felt. There were plants on the windowsill, soft music playing, and a half-finished jigsaw puzzle on the dining table. It wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. I've started doing things for me again. I joined a pottery class on Thursdays, which sounds cliché, but there's something deeply healing about shaping clay with your hands, like building something new from nothing. I started running in the mornings, just around the neighborhood, but it's become my quiet ritual. And, okay, I've been seeing someone. His name's Daniel. We met at a mutual friend's barbecue in May. He's divorced too, no drama, no bitterness. The first time we talked, it wasn't flirtatious, just easy. He asked what I did for fun, and I remember laughing and saying, "I'm still figuring that out. We've been taking it slow. No rushing, no pretending it's something it's not." He knows about Mark, about the divorce, about how careful I've become with my heart. And instead of getting defensive or insecure, he just listens. The other night, I told him I still feel strange calling someone my boyfriend. He smiled and said, "Then don't. Just call me someone who makes you laugh." That small comment made me tear up more than I care to admit, because laughter, real, genuine laughter, was something I didn't realize I'd been missing for years. Mark knows about Daniel. He found out when he dropped the kids off and saw Daniel's car in the driveway. Later that night, he texted me, "I'm glad you're finding happiness again. You deserve it." And for once I believed he meant it. There's no neat ending to this kind of story. Divorce doesn't close like a chapter. It fades out slowly, leaving fragments of what was. But now, those fragments don't cut me the way they used to. They've softened into lessons. I learned that love can't survive on nostalgia, that no amount of loyalty can make someone stay if their heart has already left, and that staying for the kids teaches them the wrong version of love, one built on endurance instead of respect. Sometimes I still catch myself remembering the good years. Sunday mornings making pancakes, family road trips, laughing over dumb inside jokes. But now, instead of aching for them, I just feel thankful. Those memories were real once. They don't need to be rewritten. I guess that's what healing really is. When the past stops feeling like a weight and starts feeling like a story that shaped you, not defined you. So no, he shouldn't have had a girlfriend on the side. But if I'm honest, I'm glad it all happened, because losing him forced me to find myself. And that's the one relationship I'll never risk again. It's been almost 2 years since the divorce was finalized, and if someone had told me back then that I'd be sitting here, in a quiet house that feels peaceful instead of lonely, I would have laughed in disbelief. I'm not going to lie and say it was easy. Healing was slow. There were mornings I'd wake up and forget, just for a second, that everything had changed. I'd instinctively glance at the side of the bed where Mark used to sleep, or catch myself reaching for my phone to text him about something funny the kids did. Those moments would sting, but each time the sting faded faster. Now, life feels stable, not exciting all the time, but calm in a way that I didn't realize I craved. Emma started college this fall. She's studying psychology at Oregon State. Watching her pack up her dorm stuff was surreal. She hugged me before she left and said, "Mom, you taught me what self-respect looks like." That moment, that one sentence, felt like the validation I didn't even know I'd been waiting for. Our son, Caleb, is 17 now. He's quieter than Emma, but incredibly grounded. He's got this old soul energy that sometimes surprises me. A few weeks ago, we were having dinner and he said, "I don't think you and Dad were bad together. I just think you both outgrew what you were trying to keep alive." It hit me so deeply, because it was true. As for Mark, our relationship has settled into something cordial, respectful even. We text about the kids, sometimes share a joke about how we managed to raise 2 amazing humans without completely messing them up. He and Jenna are still together, though I've heard from mutual friends that things haven't been as smooth as they seemed at first. He apologized again recently. Not in a rehearsed way, but genuinely. We were sitting in the car outside Emma's dorm, waiting for her to come out. He looked over at me and said, "I still don't understand why I thought having someone on the side would fix anything. I ruined something I didn't appreciate until it was gone." I just nodded and told him, "We both did things wrong, but we're doing better now. For them, and for ourselves." He smiled and said, "You seem happier." And I am. Daniel is still in my life, though it's evolved. We dated for about a year and a half, and we eventually decided to part ways amicably. There wasn't any big fight or betrayal. It just became clear that what we needed long-term wasn't the same. But I'll always be grateful for him. He helped me rediscover joy when I'd forgotten what it felt like. After Daniel, I made a promise to myself to stay single for a while, to really enjoy my own company. I learned to cook new recipes, started hiking on weekends, even took a solo trip to Colorado just because I could. There's something empowering about sitting alone in a cafe in a new city, knowing you don't owe anyone your time or explanations. I started journaling again, too. Something I hadn't done since my 20s. I found one of my old notebooks from early in my marriage, full of hopeful entries about love and plans and dreams. Reading them made me smile. That version of me was naive, yes, but she was also brave in her own way. She believed in love fiercely, even when it didn't always love her back. And maybe that's okay. Now, I don't see love as this grand, all-consuming thing. I see it as small, quiet moments, kindness, understanding, shared laughter, the kind that doesn't need to be dramatic to be real. The last time Mark came by to drop Caleb off, he stayed a while to talk. He looked around the living room and said, "You've really made this place your own." I laughed and said, "It took me long enough." He paused for a moment before saying, "I miss being your friend sometimes," I told him. "Maybe someday we can be that again, but for now this is good." And it was. After he left, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, watching the sunset. For years, sunsets made me sad. They felt like endings. Now they just feel like transitions, gentle reminders that even endings can be beautiful. I don't hate Mark. I don't hate what happened. I don't even hate the version of myself that stayed too long, hoping things would go back to how they were. She needed to stay until she finally understood her worth. And that's okay, because at the end of it all, I got something far more valuable than an apology or closure. I got peace. And peace, I've learned, is the real love story. Stories number 8. I sent my son to live with his grandma after getting too close to my daughter. And now I'm questioning everything. I never thought I'd be the kind of parent writing something like this. But I feel so lost and guilty I can barely sleep. For context, I'm a 42-year-old single mom with 2 kids. My son, Evan, who just turned 18, and my daughter Lily, who's 14. Their dad, Mark, and I divorced when Evan was 10 and Lily was 6. He lives out of state now, remarried, barely calls except on birthdays or holidays, so it's mostly been me and the kids. Figuring things out as we go. Evan's always been my rock. He matured faster than most boys his age, cooking dinners when I worked late, helping Lily with her homework, driving her to practice when I couldn't. He never complained. People used to tell me how lucky I was to have such a responsible son. And I was. But lately, that closeness between him and Lily has started to feel different. Off. It started a few months ago. Lily got really into art. She's always drawing, painting, spending hours in her room. Evan would sit with her, talk about her sketches, bring her snacks, sweet, right? Except I started noticing how inseparable they were. They'd whisper inside jokes at dinner, laugh about things I wasn't part of. And whenever I'd walk into the room, they'd stop talking. At first, I brushed it off. Teenage siblings having their own world. But then one night I overheard them watching a movie in the living room after I went to bed. It was almost midnight, and when I peeked in, the lights were off. Lily was curled up under a blanket next to him. Not on him or anything, but close enough that it made my stomach twist. I told myself I was overthinking it. Evan's a good kid. He loves his sister, but then little things started piling up. He started getting defensive when I asked him to give her space. Once, when I told Lily to clean her room, she snapped, "Evan said you're just being controlling." I froze. When did my son start undermining me to his sister? Then there was the phone thing. I noticed Evan would text her even when they were in the same house. Stuff like, "You okay?" and "Don't let mom get to you." I confronted him one night, asked what was going on. He just said, "Lily gets anxious sometimes. I'm helping her calm down." That should have comforted me. But the way he said it, protective, almost possessive, unsettled me. The final straw happened 2 weeks ago. I came home early from work and heard them laughing upstairs. I walked into Lily's room and found Evan sitting on her bed, showing her something on his phone. She was lying sideways, her legs over his lap. Not sexual, but way too intimate for siblings. I snapped. I told Evan to get up, told Lily to go downstairs. He stood up immediately but glared at me like I'd done something wrong. I remember yelling, "You're 18, she's 14. You can't act like this." And his face just crumpled. He said, "It's not like that, Mom. She's my sister. I love her." I said something awful then. I told him I didn't care what his intentions were, that it looked wrong, that I wasn't comfortable with it anymore. I told him to pack a bag and go stay with his grandma for a while until I figured out what to do. He begged me not to. Lily started crying, saying I was tearing the family apart, but I stood firm. He left that night. The silence in the house afterward was unbearable. Lily barely spoke to me for days. When she finally did, she said, "You made him feel like a monster." I tried explaining that I just needed space, that boundaries matter. But she just shook her head and went back to her room. Evan's been staying with my mom in Indiana for 2 weeks now. He texts me sometimes. Polite, short replies. "I'm fine. Mom, school's okay. Tell Lily I miss her." My mom says he's been quiet, spends most of his time helping her around the house. The guilt is eating me alive. I keep replaying that night over and over. Was I protecting my daughter, or was I punishing my son for being too caring? I know what I saw looked bad, but maybe it really was innocent. Maybe they were just close, and I ruined it. But then another part of me whispers, what if I didn't overreact? What if that line, even if it was unintentional, could have blurred over time? It's hard to describe the look on Evan's face when I told him to leave. It wasn't anger, it was betrayal. Yesterday, Lily came downstairs holding a sketchbook. She opened it and showed me a drawing she'd done. Evan sitting on the porch, looking out at the sunset. Underneath, she'd written, "My best friend." I felt something break in my chest. We sat there quietly for a long time, and then she said, "He's the only one who really gets me." I wanted to tell her I do too. But in that moment, I realized maybe she was right. Maybe he was the one who got her. The thing is, I trust Evan. I really do. But I also know how fragile perception is, especially with teenagers. If anyone, a neighbor, a teacher, anyone, saw the kind of closeness I did, they could have taken it the wrong way. It could have ruined him, ruined her. So I tell myself I did the right thing, that I'm protecting both of them. But it doesn't feel that way. It feels like I ripped out the one solid bond they had left after years of instability and divorce, and my own exhaustion. My mom called tonight and said Evan's been asking if he can come home for Thanksgiving. I told her I'd think about it after we hung up. I sat in the dark living room and stared at the family photos on the wall. The three of us smiling. Back when things were simpler. Back when I didn't second-guess every decision I made. I don't know what's worse. The fear that I overreacted. Or the fear that I didn't. All I know is I miss my son. And I miss the way we used to be before this. Whatever this is, I keep hoping I did the right thing. But maybe, in trying so hard to protect my kids, I forgot how to trust them. It's been 3 weeks since I posted, and Thanksgiving came and went. But nothing about it went how I imagined. I thought I was prepared. I thought I'd have a plan, clear boundaries, and calm, mature conversations ready. Instead, I felt like I was walking on eggshells the entire week, and now that Evan's gone again, I don't even know if I did the right thing by letting him come home. When my mom called to confirm he'd come for the holiday, I said yes. I couldn't bear the idea of him sitting in Indiana eating takeout turkey with just my mother and the cat. Lily was thrilled, practically bouncing around when I told her. She immediately started planning his favorite dishes. Mashed potatoes the way he liked, pumpkin pie from scratch. She even cleaned her room for once, humming to herself the entire time. I thought that was a good sign. When Evan arrived the night before Thanksgiving, I swear the air changed. It's hard to explain. Part nostalgia, part tension. He looked older somehow, even though it had only been a month and a half. His hair was longer, he'd grown a faint stubble, and his eyes looked tired in a way I'd never seen before. When he saw me, he hesitated for a second, like he wasn't sure if he should hug me. I took the step forward and pulled him in. He hugged me back, stiffly at first, then tighter. I whispered, "I missed you," and he said, "I missed you too." "Mom!" Lily barreled down the stairs a second later, yelling his name, and nearly tackled him for a while. It felt normal again. They went to the kitchen, started talking a mile a minute, laughing over some meme, and I stood there trying to be grateful that they were both under the same roof again. But that night, the old unease crept back. I went to check on them around midnight, expecting to find Evan in the guest room. Instead, both of them were sitting in the living room, talking softly. I could hear bits of conversation. Lily saying things like, "Mom doesn't trust us anymore," and Evan replying, "She's scared." That's all. His tone wasn't angry, just sad. I stood in the hallway for a while, listening to the faint sound of their voices. Then I went back to bed and cried. The next day, Thanksgiving morning, I decided I wasn't going to let my anxiety ruin everything. I busied myself in the kitchen, and when Evan offered to help, I said yes. Partly because I needed the extra hands, partly because I wanted to reconnect. He chopped vegetables while I basted the turkey. For a moment, it felt easy again. We even laughed a little when he accidentally spilled the gravy. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "Mom, you really think I'd ever hurt Lily?" The words froze me. I turned to him, trying to read his face. He looked calm but wounded. "I don't think you'd hurt her," I said carefully. "I just think boundaries matter. Sometimes love can look different from the outside than it feels on the inside." He nodded slowly. "I get that, but you made me feel like some kind of freak. I was just trying to be there for her. You weren't around much those months, and she was struggling." I didn't realize it looked wrong. His voice cracked on that last word. I put the knife down and said, "I'm sorry, Evan. I didn't handle it right. I panicked. You're both at such different stages, and I was scared," he sighed. "I know, but you didn't even ask me. You just decided I was a problem." There it was, the truth I'd been avoiding. He wasn't angry because I doubted him. He was angry because I didn't trust him enough to talk first. We didn't say much after that. We finished cooking, and Thanksgiving dinner went as well as it could. My mom called to check in, and I told her everything was fine. Lily sat beside Evan the entire time, laughing at his dumb jokes, teasing him like old times. But I could feel the distance between me and him, this invisible wall I'd built without realizing it. After dinner, I went outside with a cup of coffee to get some air. Evan joined me a few minutes later. The night was cold, and we stood there silently for a while, watching our breath in the air. Then he said, "I'm going back to Grandma's after the weekend. I think it's better that way, at least for now." I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. He looked at me and said quietly, "I love you, Mom, and I love Lily, but I think we all need space to figure things out." And then, as if to make it worse, he smiled. That soft, resigned kind of smile that breaks your heart more than anger ever could. He left 2 days later. Lily locked herself in her room and didn't come out until the next morning. She's still cold toward me. She talks to Evan every night on FaceTime, and I don't stop her. I wouldn't dare. But sometimes I hear her laughing softly through the wall, and it twists something deep inside me. I've been talking to a therapist since then, just trying to untangle all this guilt and fear. She said something that stuck with me. You can be right about boundaries and still wrong about the way you set them. And I think that's exactly what happened. I wasn't wrong to want distance, but I was wrong to let fear drive me instead of communication. I reacted like a scared mom, not a rational one. I saw something I didn't understand and assumed danger where there was probably none. Now, I'm left trying to rebuild trust with both of them. Evan texts me sometimes. More often now, actually. He told me he's saving money for community college next year. Said he might get a job at a local hardware store. He ends every text with, "Love you," and I hold on to that. Lily still barely talks to me, but she's been drawing again, yesterday. I found one of her sketches on the kitchen counter. A drawing of all three of us sitting on the porch. Smiling at the bottom, she'd written in small letters, "We're still a family." It made me cry again, but this time not from guilt, from hope. I don't know if things will ever go back to how they were. Maybe they're not supposed to. Maybe this is just the awkward, painful transition of letting your kids grow up and realizing they'll never see you the same way again. But I'm trying, and when Christmas comes around, I'll invite Evan again, this time, not out of guilt or fear, but because I want him to know he has a home here. Even if I don't always get everything right. It's been 8 months since Thanksgiving, and I finally feel like I can breathe again. I wasn't planning on posting another update. Honestly, I didn't think anyone would care about my little family saga. But so much has happened since then that it feels like a chapter quietly closing, and maybe writing this is my way of letting it go. After Evan went back to my mom's, there was a long stretch of quiet. Too quiet. Lily stopped drawing for a while. She'd still FaceTime him every night, but it wasn't the same. She started sleeping less, barely eating, snapping at me for small things. When I'd ask if she missed him, she'd just shrug and say, "You wouldn't understand." And she was right. I didn't. I didn't understand how much that bond meant to her until I watched her unravel without it. Then around February, Evan started calling me more often. Little things at first, asking about bills, car stuff, recipes. But slowly the conversations got deeper. He told me he'd been working part-time at a hardware store, helping my mom with errands, and taking some online community college classes. He sounded steadier, calmer, like he'd grown up in those few months. One night, out of nowhere, he said, "Mom, I know you were scared. I was too. But I think we're okay now." That one sentence lifted a weight off my chest that I didn't realize I was still carrying. We started talking about him coming home again. Not right away, but maybe by summer. I wanted to take it slow, rebuild trust before throwing everyone back under the same roof. Meanwhile, Lily was doing better too. She joined an art club at school, started hanging out with new friends, even got her first B+ in math, a big deal for her. She still talked to Evan every few days, but it wasn't as clingy or dependent. More balanced, healthy even. When June rolled around, Evan called me one evening and said, "Mom, I think I'm ready to come home," I cried. He came back the following weekend. I can't even explain what it was like seeing him walk through that door. Taller, surer, with this quiet maturity I didn't remember before. Lily burst into tears when she saw him, hugged him like she never wanted to let go. I just stood there watching, my throat tight, because for the first time in months, it felt like we were a family again. That first week back, I made it a point to talk, really talk, to both of them. We sat down at the kitchen table one evening. No phones, no distractions. I told them I wanted to rebuild what we had, but also wanted to be honest about why I'd sent him away. I wasn't trying to punish anyone, I said. I was scared. I didn't handle it right, and I know I hurt you both, but I was trying to protect you. Evan looked at me for a long moment before saying, "I know, Mom, I get it now." Then Lily, my emotional, headstrong daughter, said something that floored me. "You were scared because you love us. That's not wrong, but you have to let us love each other too, even if it looks weird to other people." And there it was. The truth I'd been running from since the beginning. I wasn't afraid of anything bad happening. I was afraid of how it looked. I was afraid of judgment, of whispers, of the world taking something innocent and turning it ugly. After that night, things began to shift. Evan started taking more time for himself. Working, seeing friends, even dating a girl from his college class named Mia. He introduced her to us one weekend, and she was lovely. Bright, funny, grounded. Watching him with her made me realize just how young he still was, and how much he'd been forced to grow up too fast. Lily, for her part, adored Mia. The three of them would sit together on the porch, laughing about whatever ridiculous TikTok trend was happening that week, while I'd listen from the kitchen window, heart aching in the best way. A few weeks ago, we had another small family dinner. Nothing fancy, just takeout and a movie night. At one point, Lily got up to grab something from her room, and Evan turned to me. "Mom," he said quietly, "you did the right thing. You know, sending me away, I hated it, but I think I needed it." I looked at him, completely stunned. "You don't hate me for it?" He smiled, really smiled this time. "Nah, I was mad, yeah. But it made me realize how much I had to figure out for myself. And it made me realize how much you were just trying to keep us safe." That was it. The closure I didn't even know I needed. Since then, the house feels lighter. I don't hover anymore. I trust them again. Not because I convinced myself nothing could ever go wrong, but because I finally understand that love and fear can coexist. You just can't let fear steer the ship forever. Evan's planning to move into his own apartment this fall, closer to his college. Lily's starting high school next month. We're entering a new chapter. One where they don't need me in the same way. And I'm learning to be okay with that. Sometimes I still catch them sitting together on the couch, talking, sharing snacks. And for a split second that old flicker of anxiety stirs up inside me. But then I look closer, and I see it for what it really is. Two siblings who love each other deeply, who went through something painful and came out stronger for it. Last night, before bed, I found a note on the kitchen counter in Lily's handwriting. It said, "Mom, thank you for keeping us safe, even when it hurt." "Love you," I cried, again. But this time they were good tears, the kind that come when you finally feel peace. I'll never be a perfect parent. I'll always second-guess myself sometimes. But I've learned that family isn't about never making mistakes. It's about forgiving each other enough to start over, so, yeah. We're starting over, and for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough. Stories number 9. The name my stepdaughter chose when I found out I was pregnant. I cried harder than I expected to. I'd always wanted to be a mom, but after marrying someone who already had a child, I thought that dream would look different for me. My husband, Jason, has a 12-year-old daughter named Lily from his first marriage. Her mom, Melissa, passed away 6 years ago in a car accident. It's something that's always lingered quietly in the background of our lives. Not ignored, but treated with a kind of reverence. Jason doesn't talk about her often, but when he does, it's with respect. Lily was 6 when Melissa died, and when Jason and I met, she was 8. At first, she was shy but polite, the kind of kid who studies people before deciding if she trusts them. It took time, but we eventually built a really good relationship. We bake together, read, sometimes go to the park on weekends. She calls me Jess, not Mom, and that's perfectly fine. I never wanted to replace her mother. Just to be another steady adult in her life who loves her. When Jason and I told her we were expecting, she was thrilled. She made a little big sister card and drew a stick figure of herself holding a baby. She hugged me so tight that night I almost cried again. But then came the part that started all of this. The name suggestions. From the very beginning, Lily was invested in helping pick out a name for the baby. She came to me with a notebook full of them, pages of neatly written names. Some underlined, some circled. I was touched until I started reading through them. Every single name she suggested was either one that Melissa had always liked. Jason recognized them immediately, or one from her mom's side of the family. There was Ethan, which Jason said had been Melissa's top pick when she was pregnant with Lily. Then Noah, Caleb, and Landon. All names that Jason remembered her talking about years ago. The middle name Lily wanted, Michael, was Melissa's brother's name. I froze a little when Jason told me that. I understood why Lily wanted those names. It was her way of connecting this baby to her mom. But for me, it didn't sit right. I didn't want my son's name to be chosen out of grief or memory. This was my first child. I wanted something that belonged to our family, not to Jason and Melissa's past. When I brought it up to Jason, he was quiet for a long time. He finally said, "I see where you're coming from. But we can't just dismiss her ideas outright. She's trying to honor her mom." I knew he was right, but the thought of naming our baby after someone I never met, someone whose absence still defines parts of our household, made me uneasy. It felt like being pulled into a history that wasn't mine. A few days later, Lily came home from school with a new list. She was so excited. "I thought of some new ones," she said. "But I still really like Ethan. Mom loved that name." I hesitated. Then I said, "Sweetheart, Ethan is a nice name, but your dad and I are thinking of something different." The look on her face crushed me. She blinked, clearly hurt. But Mom said, she stopped herself, then added quietly, "I just thought you'd want something she would have liked too." That night, she barely spoke during dinner. After she went to bed, Jason told me he thought I'd been too blunt. I felt awful, but I also stood by what I said. "Jason," I told him, "this baby is part of our life together. I can't name him after your late wife. It wouldn't feel right to me." We ended up having a long, emotional argument about it. He said he didn't want to erase Melissa's memory, that Lily already struggles with feeling like her mom is slowly fading. I told him that honoring someone's memory is beautiful, but naming our baby after her crosses into something that's not fair to me. For a while, the topic just hung there. Lily avoided me, and Jason acted like he was stuck in the middle, which he was. I hated the tension. I didn't want this to turn into a battle over names when what I really wanted was for our family to feel whole. Then one afternoon, Lily came to me while I was folding baby clothes in the nursery. She stood at the door, holding one of her drawings, a picture of her mom, me, Jason, and the baby above it. She'd written our family. "Are you mad at me?" she asked. My heart broke a little. "Of course not," I said, setting the clothes down. "Why would you think that?" "Because you don't like the names I picked. Mom used to say names mean love. I thought if I picked one of hers, it would make him part of her too." That was the moment it finally hit me. This wasn't about control or nostalgia. This was a little girl trying to make sure her mom wasn't forgotten, trying to connect her past to a future that was changing fast. I knelt down next to her and said, "I love that you want your brother to feel close to your mom. That's really kind of you. But I think the best way to do that is to let him have his own name. So he's part of both worlds, yours and ours." She thought for a long time, then asked, "Can I help with his middle name?" That's when everything softened. We went through a bunch of names together that night, laughing at the silly ones, arguing about others. Eventually, she said, "What about James?" "It's simple. Mom liked it, but not a lot. You can like it too," I smiled. "James is perfect." When Jason came home, I told him about our talk. He listened quietly, then nodded. "You handled that better than I did," he said. A few weeks later, our son was born. We named him Henry James. When Lily came to the hospital, she held him with this look I'll never forget. Half wonder, half pride, she whispered, "Hi, Henry James." And he opened his eyes like he knew exactly who she was. It's been 6 months now. Lily still talks about her mom sometimes, but now it's more of a gentle remembering instead of a wound. She tells Henry stories about the woman who loved sunflowers, or how she used to sing "You Are My Sunshine" at bedtime. Sometimes I catch her humming it while holding him, and every time she does, I realize that she didn't need to name him after her mom to keep her memory alive. She's already doing that, just by being who she is. Update: it's been about a year since Henry was born, and things have finally started to feel settled. I wasn't sure I'd ever get to say that. Those first few months were emotional in ways I didn't expect. Not just because of the sleepless nights and new parent chaos, but because of how much the name situation lingered in small, quiet ways. When I wrote the first post, I was still navigating guilt. I knew I'd made the right decision, but I also worried I'd hurt Lily in a way that couldn't be undone. I kept thinking about her standing in that nursery doorway, clutching that drawing of our family. It replayed in my head for weeks. But slowly, things changed. Lily started spending more time with me and Henry, helping with bottles, reading him stories, showing him her drawings. She's a natural big sister, gentle, patient, protective. One evening, while she was rocking him to sleep, she whispered, "Hey Henry, did you know you're the bridge between everyone who loves you?" I almost started crying right there in the doorway. That kid understands more about love than most adults. Jason and I are doing better too. We had some rough patches early on. There were moments where I felt like a stranger in my own home. Like Melissa's memory took up space I couldn't touch. Every time someone from his family visited, they'd bring up Melissa in some small way, a story, a photo, a passing comment about how much Lily looks like her. None of it was mean-spirited, but it was hard not to feel like an outsider. One night I finally told Jason that. Not angrily, just honestly. We were sitting on the couch after putting Henry to bed, and I said, "Sometimes it feels like I'm living in someone else's house, like you're still trying to balance being her husband and being mine." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that surprised me. "I think I've been scared. Scared that if I let go too much, I'm betraying her. But I know that's not fair to you, or to us." That conversation changed everything. It wasn't a magical fix, but it opened a space for us to finally be a team again, instead of tiptoeing around old grief. A few months later, Lily had a school project where she had to make a family tree. She asked for help, and I assumed she wanted Jason. But instead, she sat down next to me and said, "I want to do both my families on one tree. Is that okay?" I asked what she meant, and she said, "Mom's part and your part, because it's all mine, so we did it together. Melissa's side, Jason's side, mine. And in the middle, Henry and Lily." When she turned it in, her teacher apparently told Jason that it made her cry. That was the first time I stopped worrying about whether I was doing right by everyone. Lily didn't need me to erase her mom. She just needed me to stay. A few weeks ago, I had one of those small, full-circle moments. Lily and I were in the kitchen baking cupcakes for Henry's first birthday. She cracked the eggs and got shells everywhere, and we started talking about how much he's grown. Out of nowhere, she said, "I think Mom would have liked his name. Henry James sounds strong." I didn't know what to say. I just smiled and said, "I think so too." Later that night, when everyone had gone home and the house was finally quiet, Jason hugged me and said, "You know, I think Melissa would have liked you." It caught me off guard. It wasn't about comparison or replacement. It was just a gentle truth that finally felt okay to hear. Now, a year later, our family feels balanced in a way that used to seem impossible. Lily's room is still filled with pictures of her mom, but there's a new one on her nightstand. A photo of her holding Henry at his first birthday. Frosting on her nose and the biggest smile I've ever seen. Sometimes I look at that photo and think about how complicated love can be. It's not neat or symmetrical. It stretches, overlaps, evolves. I used to think being the second wife meant living in the shadow of someone else's story. But now I see it differently. It's not about replacing anyone. It's about weaving something new out of what's already there. Melissa's presence will always be part of this family, and that's okay. She gave Jason and Lily love that shaped who they are. And now I get to add to that story, not erase it. The funny thing is, every time I hear Lily call out, "Jess, Henry's awake," or see her tuck his blanket in a little tighter, I realize she's already built the bridge she talked about. And on the nights when I rock Henry to sleep, I find myself humming "You Are My Sunshine," the same song Melissa used to sing to Lily. It doesn't feel strange anymore. It just feels like family. Final update. It's been 3 years since I first wrote about the name situation. And honestly, I can barely recognize the person I was back then. The stress, the resentment, the guilt, all of it felt so heavy at the time. Now it feels like something I had to walk through to get here. Life looks different now. Jason and I moved last spring to a slightly bigger house closer to his parents, which I was hesitant about at first. I thought being near them might dig up old wounds or awkward reminders of Melissa. But it's actually been good for all of us, especially Lily. She's 11 now. And she's grown into this thoughtful, creative kid who somehow manages to be both wise and hilarious. She still talks about her mom, but she also talks about me, about us, in a way that feels natural, not forced. Henry's 2.5 now, all curls and chaos. He's obsessed with cars, blueberries, and following his big sister around like she's the center of the universe. She doesn't seem to mind. In fact, she told me recently that she wants to be a teacher when she grows up, so I can tell kids to be nice to their siblings even when they drool. A few weeks ago, something happened that really hit me. Lily had a family day at school, where each kid could invite 2 adults who mean the most to them. I didn't expect to be picked. I assumed she'd want Jason and one of her grandparents, but when she came home with the permission slip, she said, "I want you and Dad to come." I asked if she was sure, if maybe her grandma might want to go, and she looked at me like I was being ridiculous. "You're my family too, Jess." Duh. That moment felt bigger than it looked. It was quiet, simple, but it healed something in me that I didn't even realize was still raw. The event itself was sweet. Kids showing off art projects, reading little essays about their families. When Lily read hers, she said, "I have 2 moms. One is in heaven, and one helps me with homework. They both love me, and that makes me lucky." I couldn't stop the tears. Jason squeezed my hand so tight, and for the first time, I didn't feel like an intruder in Melissa's story. I felt like I was part of it. Afterward, one of the teachers came up to me and said, "You must be so proud of her." And I was. Not just proud of Lily, but proud of how far all of us had come. Jason and I talk about Melissa sometimes now in an open, honest way. It's not taboo or painful, it's just a part of our shared history. He told me recently that he used to feel like he had to protect me from her memory. But now he realizes that her memory doesn't take anything away from what we have. If anything, it deepened his appreciation for the love we've built. As for Henry, he knows Mommy Jess and Lily's first mom, Melissa, from the stories Lily tells him. When he's older, I'll tell him more. I don't want him to grow up in a family where love feels like a competition. There was one more moment that really summed up where we are now. Last month, on Melissa's birthday, Lily asked if we could bake cupcakes for both moms. So we did. Chocolate with vanilla frosting. We lit 2 candles. Lily said one wish out loud and one silently. The out loud one was, "I hope everyone who loves us feels happy today." That night, after the kids were in bed, Jason and I sat outside on the porch with a glass of wine. It was quiet except for the sound of crickets and Henry's baby monitor crackling softly. Jason looked at me and said, "You know, I never thought we'd get here." I asked what he meant, and he said, "Peace. I didn't think it was possible for all of us to be okay, but we are." And he's right, we are. I used to think family was something you inherited or married into, something that came predefined. But I've learned that family can be built, reshaped and healed piece by piece. Sometimes love isn't loud or cinematic. Sometimes it's found in small, steady moments. Like a little girl handing you a school permission slip and saying, "You're my family too. That's all I ever wanted." And somehow, despite all the hurt and confusion that started this journey, I got it. Stories number 10. I've been homeschooled my whole life and always wanted to go to school. But now that I'm here, everyone hates me. I used to think public school was this magical place where people made lifelong friends, went to football games, and had inside jokes in crowded hallways. Growing up homeschooled, I spent most of my days with my mom at the kitchen table, working through online modules and reading textbooks while my younger brother built Lego cities beside me. I'd see movies and shows where teenagers had lockers, school dances, and cafeteria tables filled with laughter. And I'd imagine myself there, finally belonging. When I was 17, I convinced my parents to let me attend public school for my senior year. My mom was hesitant. She thought I'd get overwhelmed, that the social part of it would be tough. But I was determined. I wanted the experience. The real high school life before college. My dad supported me, saying it would build character. I had no idea how right he'd be, just not in the way I expected. The first day at Ridgeview High was chaos. The hallways were loud, the air thick with perfume and chatter, and the bells sounded more like an alarm than anything else. I clutched my schedule like a lifeline and tried to blend in, but I might as well have been glowing neon. I didn't know anyone. In my first class, English, the teacher, Mrs. Palmer, asked everyone to introduce themselves and say one fun fact. When it was my turn, I said, "Hi, I'm Lily. I've been homeschooled my whole life, so this is my first time in a real classroom." There was this pause, then a few giggles. I smiled awkwardly, assuming it wasn't a big deal. But the whispers started soon after. "She's the homeschooled girl," people said, like it was an exotic label. At lunch, I sat alone because the one person I tried to talk to, a girl named Madison, said, "Oh, sorry, my friends are already saving me a seat." By the end of the first week, I had a reputation I didn't earn. I overheard one kid say I was weird because I didn't know how to use the vending machine correctly. Another said I talked too proper, apparently. My vocabulary made me sound like a walking say-t question. I tried to laugh it off, but it stung. Things got worse when we had a group project in history. I got paired with 3 girls who had known each other for years: Peyton, Bree, and Tara. They barely acknowledged me. I tried contributing ideas, but every time I spoke, Tara would roll her eyes or correct me in this sarcastic tone. When it came time to present, they cut me out almost entirely. The teacher even asked afterward, "Lily, did you have a part in this?" And I had to lie and say yes. I went home crying that day, my mom told me. "Sometimes people are mean because they don't understand you," my dad said. "High school is temporary. Just get through it." But to me, it felt endless. The only person who really talked to me was a quiet guy named Jonah, who sat behind me in math. He wasn't popular either. Just one of those people who kept to himself. He'd crack little jokes under his breath when the teacher wasn't looking. And sometimes he'd walk with me to class. We bonded over both being outsiders. Though he'd been in public school his whole life, Jonah told me, "You don't have to impress them. You just have to survive senior year." That became my mantra. But surviving got harder when someone made a TikTok about me. A clip of me giving a presentation with a caption that said, "When the homeschooled kid uses 4-syllable words." It got hundreds of likes before it was deleted. I didn't even know it existed until Jonah showed me. I wanted to disappear. The next week I started eating lunch in the library. The librarian, Mrs. Reed, was kind. She let me sit in the corner by the window where I could watch the courtyard and pretend I wasn't invisible. Some days, Jonah would join me. We'd talk about music, movies, or college plans. He was the first person who made me feel seen, still. There were nights when I'd lay in bed wondering what was wrong with me. I tried to dress like everyone else, mimic their slang, even join a club, yearbook. But the moment I joined, one of the girls muttered, "Oh great, homeschooled girl's gonna edit our grammar to death." I laughed it off, but quit 2 weeks later. By spring, I'd stopped trying. I focused on my grades, which were actually great, and kept my head down. I didn't go to prom. Though Jonah asked if I wanted to, he wasn't really the prom type, and honestly, neither was I. Instead, we spent that night watching movies at his house, eating pizza, and talking about how much we wanted to escape this town. Graduation came, and when I walked across that stage, it felt surreal. I wasn't popular. I wasn't liked, but I'd made it. My parents were in the crowd, my little brother holding up a sign that said, "Go Lily," and Jonah cheering from the back, for the first time in months. I didn't care what anyone thought. After the ceremony, one of the girls from my English class, Peyton, came up to me. She said, "Hey, I just wanted to say, I didn't realize how smart you were until that final essay. You're gonna do great in college." It wasn't much, but it was something. Now, a few months later, I'm in college, and it's different. People are more open, more curious than judgmental. No one cares that I was homeschooled. They just care that I can hold a conversation and contribute to group projects. I've made friends, real friends, who don't think I'm weird for being myself. Jonah's at a different school, but we still talk all the time. Sometimes we joke about high school and how miserable it was, but now it feels like a memory instead of a wound. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that sometimes the things you romanticize turn out to be completely different when you finally get them. I thought public school would be freedom, but it was actually where I learned who I really was when people didn't accept me. And that version of me? The one who sat alone in the library, still showing up every day even when it hurt. She's stronger than I ever gave her credit for. It's been about 6 months since I started college. And honestly, it's like a completely different world. I walk across campus and no one even knows my past. The homeschooling, the TikTok humiliation, the months of being ostracized in high school. Here, everyone is starting fresh. And so am I. At first, it was intimidating. Dorm life is chaotic. Roommates, communal bathrooms. Random late-night knocks on your door. My roommate, Madison. Not the same one from high school? A coincidence, like is loud, messy, and loves to play music at odd hours. But she's also kind and curious, which makes her easy to talk to. She doesn't care that I spent 18 years at home. In fact, she asks about it constantly, genuinely interested in my experience. I've had to learn how to explain it without sounding bitter or apologetic, which has been harder than I thought. Classes are different too. I thought my homeschooling had prepared me academically, and in most subjects it did. But group work, lectures, and social discussions were entirely new. I used to sit quietly at home and read textbooks. Now I had to speak up in front of 30 students. The first time I did, I got a surprised, "Wow, you actually made a good point," from my sociology professor, Dr. Henderson, and a few nods from classmates. That gave me confidence I didn't know I had. Friendships have been the hardest part. I still get moments of insecurity, thinking, do I belong here? Will they figure out I'm awkward? But slowly, I've started finding people who actually enjoy being around me. There's this small group of friends in my dorm floor: Sam, a gamer and philosophy nerd; Grace, who's obsessed with baking; and Leo, who somehow manages to be sarcastic and sweet at the same time. We study together, eat late-night ramen, and just exist without judging each other. It's freeing. Even social events, which terrified me before, are less scary. Last weekend, they held a campus movie night outside. I didn't know anyone, but I went anyway. By the end of it, I had sat next to a few people I'd never talked to before, and we laughed through the entire movie. For the first time in a long time. I wasn't analyzing every word I said or every expression on someone else's face. I was just there. I still think about high school sometimes. Mostly when I scroll social media and see people I knew smiling in group photos. The same ones who whispered about me or made the TikTok. I used to let that sting. I'd spend hours thinking about how unfair it was, how lonely I felt, but now I scroll past and it barely registers. That life was one chapter, a necessary one. But it isn't the whole story. Even my family is adjusting to the changes. My mom calls more often now, not just for academics, but to check how I'm doing socially. She's proud, though she admits she was worried I'd fail at making friends. My dad comes by sometimes on weekends, and though he teases me about my college slang, I can see he's proud too. My little brother, who's still homeschooled, is curious about dorm life and asks endless questions. I tell him honestly, it's hard sometimes, but it's worth it. The biggest surprise, though, has been learning how to trust people. In high school, I was constantly on guard, assuming people would judge or reject me. Here, I've started letting my guard down. I talk about myself more, share stories, laugh at my own awkwardness, and for the first time it feels safe. There's someone in particular, a guy named Ethan in my psychology class. He's smart, funny, and not at all the type to judge. We've started spending more time together, working on projects, and sometimes grabbing coffee after class. It's nothing serious yet, but it's exciting just to feel a spark again. I've also started journaling about my experiences, both to process them and to see how far I've come. Reading back over the entries from high school, the ones where I was crying alone in my room or avoiding lunch tables, I hardly recognize that scared girl. She's still part of me, yes, but now there's a version who shows up, who takes risks, who laughs with new friends, and who can survive loneliness without losing herself. Sometimes, late at night, I still feel the pangs of those old insecurities. But now, instead of letting them define me, I remind myself, I made it through the place I longed for. I survived the worst of rejection, and I'm finally starting to belong somewhere. On my own terms. The journey isn't over, I know that. There will be awkward moments, misunderstandings, maybe even heartbreak. But for the first time, I feel like I can handle them. Because I've faced worse and survived. And that, more than anything, is what makes me feel like I finally belong. It's been a little over a year since I started college. And looking back now, I barely recognize the terrified, homeschooled girl who walked into Ridgeview High for the first time. That version of me thought fitting in was everything. That popularity, acceptance, and avoiding ridicule were the keys to happiness. What I've learned is that belonging isn't about being liked by everyone. It's about finding the right people and, more importantly, feeling comfortable with yourself. College has given me that perspective. I've built friendships that are genuine, not forced or performative. Sam, Grace, and Leo are still my core group. We've celebrated birthdays, pulled all-nighters for exams, and had countless late-night conversations about everything from our futures to our weirdest childhood memories. I even invited them to a small gathering at my dorm for Thanksgiving when I couldn't go home. They made me feel like family, and for the first time, I realized how healing it is to be included without conditions. Ethan and I have grown closer too. He's kind, supportive, and effortlessly fun to be around. We've been spending more time together, studying, grabbing coffee, attending campus events. And there's a sense of ease I didn't think I'd ever experience with someone new. No judgment, no awkwardness, just genuine connection. Sometimes, when we're walking across campus together, laughing about something silly, I can't help but think about how different my life feels from even a year ago. I've also started embracing new opportunities that I would never have dared to in high school. I joined a campus club that focuses on community outreach and tutoring, something that combines my love for teaching with a chance to meet people outside of my dorm circle. It's challenging and rewarding, and it's allowed me to see that my past homeschooling experience isn't a handicap. It's a strength. I have patience, organization, and the ability to work independently, all skills I didn't fully appreciate before. Even my family has seen a change in me. My parents notice it when we talk. A calm confidence in my voice, a sense of excitement about life that wasn't there before. My mom says she's proud of how I've handled the transition. And my dad jokes about how college Lily is way braver than high school Lily, which makes me laugh every time. My younger brother has been asking me to share more about college, and I can see he's genuinely curious, not judgmental, which warms my heart. I still remember the sting of high school, the isolation, the whispers, the humiliating TikTok video. But I've learned to separate my self-worth from the opinions of people who didn't take the time to understand me. Those experiences were painful, yes, but they also made me resilient. I've realized that the person I am now is stronger, more self-aware, and more capable of forming meaningful relationships than I ever imagined. Looking back, the most important lesson is that life doesn't always go the way you imagine it. I romanticized public school for years, expecting it to be perfect, only to discover how harsh it could be. But that harshness forced me to adapt, to discover who I am when no one else's validation matters. It's ironic, but the thing I wanted most, acceptance from peers, ended up teaching me to accept myself first. As I move through college, I'm not just surviving anymore, I'm thriving. I've learned to navigate social situations with confidence, to value genuine friendships, and to embrace new experiences without fear. The shy, anxious girl who once ate alone in the library has evolved into someone who can sit in a crowded cafe, laugh with friends, and even approach someone new without panic. There are still tough days. Sometimes I feel out of place, or I miss the comfort of familiarity. But now those moments are fleeting. I remind myself that I've overcome rejection, isolation, and self-doubt before, and I can do it again. I've learned that the journey isn't about avoiding pain, but about growing stronger through it. If I could go back and talk to that 17-year-old Lily on her first day at Ridgeview High, I'd tell her this: you will stumble. People will judge you, you will feel lonely, but you will survive. You will find people who appreciate you. You will discover strengths you didn't know you had, and you will come to understand that your value is not determined by anyone else's approval. And most importantly, you will finally understand what it means to belong. Not because others accept you, but because you have accepted yourself. Stories number 11. My brother is trying to build a relationship with me after he beat me up. I never thought I'd have to write something like this. Honestly, I've spent years trying to push it down, convince myself it didn't happen, and move on with my life. But here I am, sitting at my desk, staring at a blank page, because I think I need to finally put words to it. For myself, maybe for anyone who's ever been in this impossible position. I'm 24, my brother Tyler is 27. Growing up, we were close. The kind of siblings who fought over stupid things but could also share a laugh over nothing. He was the older brother everyone warns you about. Strong, opinionated, and impulsive. I was the younger, quieter one, trying to stay out of his way and occasionally get him to laugh. That balance lasted until Tyler started drinking a lot in college. At first, it was just beers at parties, harmless stuff. Then came the fights. They were small at first, arguments over nothing. But they escalated, and then came the night that changed everything. It was 2 years ago. I was 22, living at home temporarily after college, and Tyler had come back from a friend's bachelor party drunk as hell. I was sitting in the living room on my laptop, headphones on, when he came in yelling about something stupid. I don't even remember now. I told him to calm down, and he snapped. Before I could even react, he shoved me against the wall. My head hit the corner of the bookshelf, and I saw stars. He kept yelling, and when I tried to push him away, he punched me in the arm, hard enough to leave bruises that lasted weeks. I remember falling to the floor, trying to protect myself and thinking, I can't believe this is my brother, my own brother. I ran to my room, locked the door, and stayed there crying for hours. My mom and dad heard the commotion but were at work, and I didn't call anyone. I was too ashamed, too angry, too confused. I avoided him after that night. We didn't speak for months. Every time I saw him, I felt my stomach tighten and my fists clench. After a while, my parents tried to mediate. Tyler apologized, a sloppy, drunk apology, and I nodded. But I didn't mean it. Not really. I didn't trust him, and honestly, I didn't even know if I could ever forgive him. Fast forward to now, Tyler has been sober for over a year. He goes to AA meetings, he's got a steady job, and he's trying to rebuild relationships he broke along the way. That includes me. At first I tried to be polite but distant. He'd text me sometimes, hey, wanna grab lunch? Or how's work? I'd reply with a one-word answer and leave it at that. Seeing him in person made my heart race, and I could feel all the anger and fear bubbling up again. Then he started showing up at my apartment unannounced, not intrusively, but just there, sitting on the couch while I cooked, asking about my day, telling me small stories about work. He'd bring me coffee or something from the bakery I liked. It was frustrating. I wanted to hate him. I wanted to avoid him. But there he was, consistent. Calm, sober, trying. A few months ago, he asked me to join him for a hike. I hesitated. I kept picturing that night, my head hitting the wall, the fear in my chest. But something about the way he asked, without guilt-tripping or anger, made me say yes. The hike was awkward at first. I didn't speak much, just kept my eyes on the path. Tyler walked a few steps ahead, turned around and said, I know I can't erase what happened. I want to be better. For you, for me, for all the time I wasted. I swallowed hard. Tyler, you hurt me. I don't know if I can just forget that. He nodded. I know. I don't want you to forget. I want you to see that I'm trying, every day. I can't ask you to forgive me right now. I just want you to know I'm doing everything I can to be the brother I should have been. It was the first time in years I felt like he actually understood the weight of what he'd done. And yet, I couldn't shake the anger, the memory of my fear, the feeling that he'd taken something from me I couldn't get back. We started seeing each other more, slowly, lunches, phone calls, small things that used to be normal between siblings. Sometimes he'd get too close, and I'd have to step back. Other times, I could almost feel the old bond surfacing, but the shadow of that night always lingered. Then came last week. Tyler called me, asking if he could stop by. I hesitated, then said yes when he showed up. He had a photo album in his hands. I thought maybe we could start fresh, he said softly, opening the album to pictures of us growing up. Birthdays, holidays, summer trips. I want to remember the good times too, and maybe make some new ones. I looked at him, and for the first time in a long time, I saw my brother, not the one who beat me, but the one I used to laugh with, the one who taught me how to ride a bike, who defended me at school, who shared late-night ice cream with me when our parents weren't looking. We sat there flipping through pictures for hours. I laughed at some of the ridiculous hairstyles, some of the awkward fashion choices. I even cried a little at the memory of a Christmas morning when we got matching hoodies and ended up wearing them all day. Afterward, he said, I know I can't just erase the past, but maybe I can build something from now on, even if it's small. I nodded. I don't know if I'm ready to fully trust you, but I want to try carefully. And that's where we are now. Careful, cautious, trying, it's not perfect. I still get flashbacks when he raises his voice. I still tense up when he gets too close. But he's showing up. Sober, patient, consistent. And I'm slowly learning to let myself hope that maybe, just maybe, we can have a real relationship again. I don't know how it will turn out. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive him, or if the fear will ever completely go away. But I do know that he's trying. And that matters. It has to. Because if he isn't trying, then what happened that night would be the end of everything between us. Now, when he calls me just to say, "Hey, how's your day?" I pick up the phone, and I try to remember that he's my brother. It's been about 6 months since I first let Tyler back into my life in small ways. And honestly, it's been exhausting, terrifying, and somehow kind of amazing. I've never experienced a roller coaster quite like this. One moment, I'm laughing over a dumb memory from our childhood. The next, I'm snapping at him for leaning too close while we're watching a movie. Heart racing, flashbacks flooding back. The hardest part has been learning how to navigate boundaries. Tyler has been careful. He never raises his voice, never tries to corner me, never acts like the Tyler who beat me up. But I catch myself reacting to old habits, flinching when he gestures abruptly, over-explaining why I need space, even sometimes avoiding him for a few hours just to calm down. We started small, lunch dates once a week, walks in the park, texting back and forth. He's sober, stable, consistent, and that consistency has been strangely grounding. There was one night a few months ago when he showed up at my apartment unannounced. Something that would have triggered panic a year ago. But this time, I was calm. He came in, carrying 2 coffees and a ridiculous grin. "I saw this on the way here and thought of you," he said, holding up a donut shaped like a unicorn. I laughed, genuine, unguarded, and something shifted. For a moment, I remembered what it was like to have a brother who could make me laugh until my stomach hurt. Of course, not everything is perfect. There are still moments when the past crashes in. The other night, we were joking around in the kitchen, and he playfully shoved me as we reached for the last slice of pizza. I froze, heart pounding, and he instantly stepped back. "I'm so sorry," he said, eyes wide. "I didn't mean—" "It's fine," I said. But my hands were shaking. I had to step into the living room, sit down, and breathe for a few minutes before I could talk to him again. Tyler stayed silent, not angry, not defensive, just waiting, respecting the space I needed. It's moments like that that remind me why rebuilding trust is so complicated. It's not just about forgiving him. It's about rewiring my instincts, learning that he can be present without being dangerous. And he is trying, God, he really is. We've started sharing more memories too, the other day. He pulled out an old box of childhood photos he'd found in his closet at his apartment. I swear I haven't laughed that hard in years. Us covered in mud after some disastrous camping trip. Mom scolding us while we posed with fake grins. Birthdays where the cake always fell apart. Even though the memories are silly, they feel sacred now. Proof that we had something good before, and maybe we can have it again. There's also been therapy involved. I convinced both of us to go to a sibling-focused counselor, someone who specializes in rebuilding family relationships after trauma. At first, I was skeptical. I thought therapy would just dredge up old anger, but it's helped. We talk about triggers, boundaries, communication. Tyler admits when he doesn't understand why I react a certain way. And I try to explain without lecturing. It's messy, slow work, but there's progress. A big moment came a few weeks ago. Tyler called me after a long day at work. Sounding nervous. "Hey," he said, voice low. "I was wondering if you'd be okay with me staying over for a couple of nights. I don't want to be alone right now." My first instinct was to say no. Old fear flared instantly. But then I thought about how much he's grown, how consistent he's been, how careful he is. And I realized maybe this is part of rebuilding, too, letting him in while still protecting myself. "I'm nervous," I admitted. "But, okay, a couple of nights, no pressure," he smiled, relief washing over his face. Those 2 nights went surprisingly well. We cooked dinner together, watched a movie, even played a ridiculous board game that devolved into us laughing until we cried. No tension, no fear, just brothers being brothers, cautiously, carefully, even Lily, my younger sibling in the middle of all this chaos of trust, has started to thaw toward him. She's still protective. She used to glare at him if he even looked in my direction funny. But lately, she's been joking around with him, teasing him over video games, even asking him to help with homework. I didn't realize how much tension had affected her until I saw her smile freely around him again. I don't want to sugarcoat it. It's far from perfect. There are setbacks. Tyler has moments of self-doubt, wondering if I'll ever really forgive him. I have moments of panic, remembering that night. Sometimes the anger flares, uninvited, but there's also hope. There's laughter, connection, and trust being rebuilt, brick by careful brick. The biggest lesson I've learned over these months is this: reconciliation doesn't erase trauma. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Trust doesn't return overnight, but consistency, patience, and genuine effort can create something new. Something cautious, fragile, but beautiful. Tyler isn't the brother I knew in childhood, and I'm not the younger sibling I once was. But we're trying, and for now that's enough. Every time he leaves after a visit, I find myself missing him. Not the scared, violent Tyler from that night 2 years ago, but this new Tyler, the one who shows up sober, who listens, who makes me laugh. The one I want to keep in my life, carefully, cautiously, and with hope. And I think that maybe, just maybe, that's all a family really needs, a chance to try again. It's been over a year since I first started cautiously letting Tyler back into my life, and I can honestly say, it's changed everything. Not magically, not perfectly, but in a way that feels grounded, real, and somehow hopeful. Tyler has continued to be consistent. Therapy, work, AA meetings. He's no longer the unpredictable, volatile brother I feared. He's steady, reliable, and more thoughtful than I ever imagined he could be. But the biggest change has been in me. I've stopped flinching at raised voices. I've learned to speak up about my boundaries without guilt, and I've begun to trust him again, slowly, cautiously, but genuinely. A big turning point came last summer. Tyler asked if I'd join him on a weekend road trip. No big reason. Just to get out of town, catch some fresh air. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. Another part screamed no, remember what he did, but I agreed. I realized that rebuilding a relationship requires risk, vulnerability, and I had to meet him halfway. The trip was healing in ways I didn't expect. We stayed in a small cabin near a lake, cooked together, took long walks, and talked, really talked, about the past. I think about that night every day. Tyler admitted one evening, staring at the fire, "I hate that I hurt you. I hate that I lost your trust. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make it up to you." I swallowed hard, feeling tears prick at my eyes. "Tyler, you've been trying. That's what matters. You show up every day, and that's why I'm here with you now." He nodded, quiet for a long moment, then he said, "I want us to be brothers again. Not the old version, not perfect, but real." And I realized that's exactly what I wanted too. Not perfection, not forgetting, just honesty, trust, and presence. Back home, things began to normalize in a way I didn't think was possible. Tyler has become a part of my daily life again. Casual, comfortable, unthreatening. He helps with small stuff, like picking up groceries or helping me move furniture, but he also shows up for emotional moments, birthdays, family dinners, even stressful work days when I need someone to vent to. We've even rebuilt some traditions we'd lost. Every Sunday we cook breakfast together. Pancakes, eggs, bacon, and talk about our week. Sometimes we argue, sometimes we tease, but it's healthy. There's laughter, there's connection, and slowly, over months, the fear that once dominated me has faded into cautious trust. Lily, who witnessed some of the tension and distance, has fully warmed up to him again too. She jokes with him, asks for his advice, and even invites him to school events. Seeing her smile freely around him without tension is freeing. It's proof that healing can ripple outward. Even after trauma, of course, it hasn't been a straight line. There were setbacks. A few months ago, Tyler got frustrated over a miscommunication and raised his voice, not yelling, but firm, and it made me tense instantly. I told him I needed a break, and he stepped back immediately, apologizing. That moment reminded me that trust isn't linear. You can rebuild, but it requires ongoing attention, patience, and boundaries. We've also begun talking about the future. Tyler's planning to move into a new apartment closer to his job, which I support. But we've discussed ways to keep our bond strong. Weekly visits, calls, shared hobbies. We're planning a small family trip next summer, just the three of us and our parents. I never thought I'd be excited about traveling with him again. But I am. Emotionally, I feel lighter. I don't carry that tight, panicked feeling in my chest whenever he's around. I can hug him without flinching. I can laugh at his dumb jokes without second-guessing. I still remember that night, always will, but it no longer defines him. Or us. The biggest change, though, is perspective. I've learned that forgiveness isn't forgetting. Trust isn't binary. Healing is messy, slow, and requires courage from both sides. Tyler's efforts, daily, consistent, genuine, have reminded me that people can change, that relationships can be repaired when both parties are willing to work patiently and carefully. Last night, we had one of our quiet Sunday breakfasts. Tyler poured syrup over pancakes he burned slightly classic Tyler and grinned. Lily rolled her eyes, laughing. I looked at them. Two people I love deeply, and thought about how far we've come. I'm not naive. I know life will throw challenges, and there may be days when I feel fear or doubt creep in. But I've also learned that fear doesn't have to control me. Tyler doesn't have to be a threat. He can be a brother. The kind I always wanted. Just tempered by lessons learned and trust rebuilt. For anyone in a similar situation, I want to say this. Reconciliation is possible. Healing is possible. But it's not instant. It's not easy. It's messy, painful, and requires honesty, boundaries, and patience. And sometimes, it means taking a risk, letting someone in again, even when you're scared. I don't know what the next year will bring. I don't know if we'll ever be exactly how we were in childhood. But I do know that we're building something real now. Something stronger because we've faced the worst and decided to try anyway. And for the first time in a long time, that feels like enough. Stories number 12. Finally cracked the code on office small talk, and it's way less complicated than I thought. I used to dread small talk at work. Like, truly dread it. Not in a cute, haha, I'm an introvert kind of way. More in the, I'd rather fake a phone call than have to discuss the weather near the Keurig kind of way. I work as a data analyst for a mid-sized marketing firm in Denver, and while I love the analytical side of my job, the social side has always been rough. I'm fine one-on-one or in structured meetings, but hallway chatter, elevator banter, those random, how was your weekend, drive-bys, torture. When I started this job 3 years ago, I remember my first week being a blur of awkward smiles and weird silences. I'd walk into the break room, see a cluster of people chatting, and immediately pivot to, oh, I forgot my water bottle. And escape. I could handle clients and presentations fine. It was my coworkers I couldn't figure out. There's something about office culture that feels like a foreign language to me. Everyone seems to instinctively know the rhythm of it. When to laugh, when to nod, when to throw in a right, totally. Meanwhile, I'm standing there calculating how long is socially acceptable to hold eye contact before it becomes creepy. My boss, Rachel, is the type who can make friends with a rock. Everyone loves her. She once got an entire department singing happy birthday to the UPS guy. One day during lunch, she mentioned, you know, people just want to feel like you see them. You don't have to be interesting. Just curious. I nodded like I got it, but I didn't. I spent years trying to decode what she meant. Then came this past January, we got a new hire, a guy named Travis. He's around my age, mid-30s, friendly. Always wearing those slightly too tight polos that show he takes his gym time seriously. He's also one of those people who talks to everyone. Literally everyone. By the second week, he knew which IT person had a new puppy, which HR manager was training for a marathon, and which intern hated mayonnaise. I watched him work a room like he was running a social experiment. He didn't say anything profound. It was just the way he asked questions. Hey, how was your kids' game? Or, you said you were redoing your kitchen. How's that going? Always specific, always light, and people lit up when he remembered details, so I decided to study him. Not in a creepy way, well, maybe a little creepy, but I started noting what he did differently. I realized that small talk isn't about being witty. It's about being easy. He didn't try to impress anyone. He just gave them little openings to talk about themselves. One morning, I decided to try it. I saw Sarah from accounting in the break room. Normally, I'd nod and flee. But I remembered she'd mentioned last week that her son had a science fair. So I said, hey, how'd the volcano project go? She smiled immediately. It exploded in the garage, but he got second place. We ended up chatting for 5 minutes. It was painless. Actually kind of nice. After that, I made it a game. Every day, I'd pick one person and remember one tiny thing about them. Their dog, their favorite show, whatever. Then I'd ask about it later. At first, it felt forced. But over time, it got natural. People started approaching me to chat. One afternoon, I was walking past the conference room and heard someone say, ask Evan. He's good at this kind of stuff. It stopped me in my tracks. Me, the guy who used to fake phone calls to avoid interaction. The real shift happened during our spring team outing. We went to a Rockies game, and I ended up sitting between Rachel and Travis. Normally, that would have been my nightmare. Two heavy hitters in the small talk Olympics. But it was actually fun. Travis cracked jokes, Rachel told stories, and I found myself jumping in naturally. No overthinking, no mental script, just talking. At one point, Rachel leaned over and said, "You've really come out of your shell this year." I laughed it off, but inside it felt huge. By summer, I realized something else. The less I focused on saying the right thing, the easier everything got. The key wasn't charm, it was paying attention. People love when you remember small details because it tells them you actually listened. I also stopped trying to force deep conversations. For years I thought small talk was shallow, pointless fluff. But now I see it's like the handshake before the friendship. It's how you build comfort. Not every chat needs to lead to something profound. Sometimes you just talk about the weather until trust sneaks in. There was one particular afternoon that really cemented this for me. Our office had one of those mandatory fun days, an escape room outing. I got paired with people I didn't know well. A marketing coordinator named Lily, a developer named Dean, and Travis. We spent an hour trying to solve puzzles while making sarcastic jokes about how bad we were at teamwork. Afterward, we grabbed tacos. I mentioned offhand that I'd been learning guitar during quarantine, and Dean lit up. He'd been playing for 10 years. We started talking about music, and before I knew it, he invited me to his weekend jam group 2 months later. I was playing rhythm guitar at his backyard barbecue, surrounded by coworkers who used to intimidate me. It hit me then, small talk had built all of this. Not instant best friends, not deep confessions, but slow, steady comfort. The kind that eventually becomes real connection now. I'm the one who asks the new hires how their first week's going. I remember people's birthdays. I even started an informal Friday lunch group that's become kind of a ritual. It's not because I suddenly love chatting about reality TV or weather patterns. I still don't. It's because I finally see what's underneath all that. People just want to feel seen. Last week, Rachel asked me to mentor a new analyst starting next month. 3 years ago, I would have panicked. Now, I'm actually excited. Not because I have some social secret, but because I finally understand the code. Be curious, be kind. And remember that most people are just as unsure as you. The irony? Travis, the guy who unknowingly taught me all this, got promoted and moved to another branch. On his last day, he said, "You know, Evan, you're one of the easiest people here to talk to." And I laughed, because if only he knew where I started. I cracked the code. All right, and it wasn't complicated at all. It just took me years to realize that listening is the only real small talk skill that matters. Update: it's been about a year since I wrote that post. And honestly, my relationship with small talk at work has changed in ways I didn't anticipate. I still get nervous when I walk into a room full of strangers, but the dread has softened. I actually look forward to casual interactions now, which is something I never thought I'd say. After that Rockies game and the escape room, I started paying more attention to how small talk could shape the office dynamic. I realized that the little conversations weren't just a way to pass time. They were a way to build trust. I started noticing patterns I'd missed before. Someone mentioning a hobby, a side project, or even a family milestone was an opening, a doorway into meaningful connection. I began keeping a mental note of details, not in a creepy way, but just enough that when someone mentioned their kid's soccer game or a weekend hiking trip, I could follow up later. It blew people away. When I asked Dean how his jam session went, he grinned and launched into stories about his bandmates. Lily loved that I remembered the tiny detail about her painting competition. It's small, but it's powerful. People like being seen, remembered, acknowledged. Even Jason, my best friend outside work, noticed the difference. One night over drinks, he said, "Evan, I swear you're a different person at the office now. People actually seek you out." I laughed, a little embarrassed, but also proud. Then came the promotion opportunity I hadn't expected. The company was expanding the data team, and Rachel, my boss, asked me if I'd consider leading a small group of new analysts. Normally, I would have panicked at the thought of managing a team of socially skilled people while navigating office culture myself. But now, I felt prepared, not because I'm suddenly a people person, but because I finally understand how relationships work at work. Attention, curiosity, patience, training. The new analyst was a revelation. I could see how many of them were just as awkward as I had been when I started. The same anxious looks, the same nervous energy, the same overthinking every greeting. I made it my mission to make their first month easier. I listened, I asked about hobbies, I followed up on tiny details. By the third week, the team was chatting in the break room without hesitation, and it felt effortless. Watching that, I realized I'd internalized the lessons Travis had unknowingly taught me. Something funny happened during one of these training sessions. One of the new analysts, a woman named Allison, was struggling to talk to her peers. I encouraged her to ask questions and just show genuine interest. Later that day, she came back smiling and said, "Evan, I can't believe how easy it feels when I just ask someone about their weekend. It's like magic." I just laughed. "Not magic," I told her. "Just noticing people." That's when it really hit me. Small talk isn't fluff, it's foundation. It's how a team becomes a family, how colleagues become friends, how trust develops without a single formal meeting. The other day, at a casual Friday lunch, someone from HR mentioned how much smoother the office feels now compared to last year. They specifically called out the data team, saying people were more collaborative and open. I almost laughed aloud because it all started with remembering a kid's science project, asking about a volcano, and realizing that genuine curiosity beats scripted conversations every time. Even social events feel different now. The holiday party came and went without any awkward silences or forced networking. I found myself chatting easily with people I'd barely known a year ago, swapping stories about weekend plans, favorite movies, and even food preferences. I left that night thinking, wow, this doesn't feel like work. This feels like a community. Small talk still isn't my natural element. I'll never be the person who can effortlessly riff about the latest reality TV drama. But I've learned something better. Listening, remembering, and asking thoughtful questions is enough. It's enough to make people feel valued. It's enough to make work feel less transactional and more human. I even got a note from Rachel last week. "Evan, your team is thriving, and the office vibe is better because of the culture you're helping build. Thank you." That's when I realized the change isn't just personal, it's ripple effect. My small shift in approach affected dozens of people, making the environment more supportive and connected. So here I am, a year later, still not the most gregarious person in the office, but someone who now genuinely enjoys the human side of work. It's still casual, still light, but it's real. I finally get that small talk isn't a skill. It's an act of attention, and attention is the simplest form of kindness. Final update. It's been nearly 3 years since I first wrote about cracking the office small talk code. And looking back, I barely recognize the anxious, awkward version of myself from that first post. Honestly, I don't think I would have believed anyone if they told me that I'd end up not just surviving small talk, but actually enjoying it. A lot changed gradually, but one key moment really crystallized it for me. Our office moved into a new building last year, and with it came open-plan workspaces, shared lounges, and what felt like a million opportunities for casual conversation. At first, I panicked. Open layouts are terrifying for someone who used to avoid the break room like it was a trap. But something clicked during the first week. I realized that all the little things I'd been practicing, remembering details, following up on small interests, asking thoughtful questions, added up. People started seeking me out for lunch, for advice, even just for a quick chat about weekend plans. Travis, the guy who had unknowingly taught me everything, had moved to another branch by then, but the habits he'd inspired stuck. I caught myself thinking, wait, I'm the person other people are noticing for being approachable? It was surreal. A few colleagues, including Lily from accounting and Dean from development, started jokingly calling me the small talk whisperer. I laughed at first, but inside, I felt proud. This was something I had genuinely mastered, not by faking charm, but by listening. Travis, the guy who had unknowingly taught me everything, had moved to another branch by then, but the habits he'd inspired stuck. I caught myself thinking, wait, I'm the person other people are noticing for being approachable? It was surreal. A few colleagues, including Lily from accounting and Dean from development, started jokingly calling me the small talk whisperer. I laughed at first, but inside, I felt proud. This was something I had genuinely mastered, not by faking charm, but by listening. Over the past year, I took it a step further. I started organizing monthly informal gatherings for our team. Board games, pizza nights, even weekend hikes. Initially, I was terrified of awkward silences or people leaving early, but every event exceeded my expectations. People talked, laughed, shared stories, and helped each other with challenges outside work. The office atmosphere improved dramatically. Even our boss, Rachel, mentioned during a quarterly meeting that the team's cohesion had noticeably strengthened, citing how people seemed more willing to collaborate and share ideas. Mentoring new analysts became a highlight of my role. Watching them struggle at first with social anxiety reminded me so much of my own early days. I could guide them in ways no handbook could, encouraging genuine curiosity, showing them how remembering a small personal detail can open doors, teaching them that you don't have to be flashy or witty to be engaging. A few of them have told me it completely changed their perspective on office culture, and that's incredibly rewarding. One of the most surprising outcomes is how this has affected my personal confidence. I no longer feel drained or anxious after casual conversations. I've learned that the fear I had wasn't about small talk itself. It was about vulnerability. Being curious, attentive, and genuine doesn't just make others feel seen, it affirms your own place in the room. I feel like I finally belong. And that's a transformative feeling. Even social events beyond work feel different now. Company holiday parties, team outings, and casual coffee breaks are no longer tests of endurance. They're opportunities to connect, genuinely and meaningfully. I've built friendships that I didn't think were possible when I first started, some of which extend outside work entirely. I've learned that investing in small talk is investing in community, and that community makes every day smoother, happier, and more human. Looking back, I realized that small talk isn't a skill in the traditional sense. It's a mindset, an act of attention and empathy. It's noticing the little things, following up on tiny details, and letting people feel that they matter. That's it. Nothing more complicated than that. And the ripple effect is remarkable. Today, I'm not just comfortable with office small talk. I've become a quiet advocate for it. I encourage new hires to embrace curiosity. I model attentiveness, and I help shape a culture where everyone feels seen. I sometimes think about that anxious first week and laugh at how far I've come. What felt like an insurmountable challenge back then turned out to be one of the most humanizing and rewarding lessons of my life. The office still isn't perfect, and people still occasionally throw curveball questions at me. But now I embrace them. I greet each casual conversation with curiosity and openness, knowing that even a 5-minute chat can strengthen trust, deepen relationships, and make work and life feel a little brighter. I finally cracked the code. It wasn't a code at all, really. Just listening, noticing, and caring, and it turns out that's more powerful than I ever imagined. Stories number 13. I want to divorce my husband after just a year of being married. I never thought I'd be here a year ago. I was walking down the aisle with Ethan, my husband, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. He was charming, ambitious, funny. Everything I thought I wanted in a partner. Our wedding was beautiful. My family was thrilled, and our friends called it the perfect day. I even remember thinking, this is it. This is forever. But forever feels very different now. It started with small things. Disagreements about money, chores, and how we spent our weekends. Ethan loves spontaneity. I crave routine. He'd suggest last-minute trips or staying out late. While I wanted quiet nights at home, I tried to compromise. But over time, I realized our lifestyles were incompatible in ways I hadn't considered. Then came the bigger issues, communication, or the lack of it. I've always been someone who talks through problems, who wants to understand motives and feelings. Ethan shuts down, he avoids discussions, deflects responsibility, and sometimes gets defensive in ways that leave me feeling small. Arguments that should take 20 minutes to resolve would last hours. With neither of us satisfied, I tried therapy. We went to couples counseling for 3 months. The therapist, Dr. Riley, was great. She helped us see patterns and encouraged us to find common ground. But sessions ended with me exhausted and frustrated, and Ethan claiming that nothing was wrong once we left her office. I realized counseling can only do so much when only one person is willing to put in the effort. The hardest part, honestly, has been acknowledging my own feelings. I love him in some ways. I remember the way he laughs, the little things he does that used to make me swoon. But love isn't enough. I found myself dreading evenings, planning my own alone time just to feel at peace, and questioning why I stayed with someone who drains my energy instead of lifting it. Our families notice it too. My mom, Claire, has been gently asking if everything's okay. She remembers how I used to glow around Ethan. My dad, Michael, is more direct, saying, "If you're unhappy now, it won't magically change." Ethan's parents, on the other hand, keep insisting that we need to give it more time, which only makes me feel trapped. Like I'm the problem for wanting out so soon. Financially, we're tangled. but not irreparably. We rented an apartment together, opened a joint account for bills, and bought a few shared items, but nothing catastrophic. It's just the logistics that make me anxious. Sorting out leases, dividing assets, explaining to landlords and banks. I've read online about people who split after a few years. But I worry, am I overreacting for leaving after only 1 year? I've tried talking to friends, but it's complicated. My closest friend, Hannah, told me, if you want out, you probably should, but make sure you're not just being impulsive. Another friend, James, said, 1 year isn't forever. It's fine to walk away if it's not right. I appreciate their honesty, but it doesn't make the decision easier. Even more complicated is guilt. Ethan isn't abusive, manipulative, or cruel. He's just incompatible with me. That doesn't feel enough to justify leaving, at least in my head. I keep imagining telling my grandmother or my younger siblings and having them say, "You gave up too soon." But I've realized that staying for appearances, or because leaving seems dramatic, is unfair to both of us. I've been researching divorce logistics, talking to a lawyer named Claire Simmons who specializes in young couples. She was practical, almost blunt. You're legally adults, a year doesn't matter. Focus on dividing what you need and moving forward. Don't overthink morality. Think practicality. It was refreshing to hear someone strip it down to the basics. Separation, assets, living arrangements. The hardest part is the emotional preparation. Ethan loves me, or at least he says he does. He's cried when I hinted at separation, pleading that we work through it, promising he'll change. I can't lie. I wish change were possible, wish compromise could bridge the gap, but I've reached a point where I know compromise won't make me happy, only temporarily numb the discomfort. I've started packing some of my things into a spare storage unit. Small steps to claim my independence. I've opened a personal bank account and started budgeting separately. I've even been thinking about moving closer to my family after the split, somewhere I can feel grounded while navigating post-divorce life. The questions that haunt me are simple, yet heavy. How do I explain this without making him feel like a failure? How do I navigate a year-long marriage that feels like a lifetime, emotionally speaking? And, ultimately, how do I stay true to myself without being consumed by guilt or second-guessing? I don't know what the next few months will look like. I don't know if Ethan will fight harder, cry more, or retreat entirely. I just know that I need to honor my feelings and accept that it's okay to step away from a marriage that isn't right, even if it's only been a year. If anyone has advice for navigating a divorce this early in marriage, or for dealing with the guilt that comes with leaving someone you still care about, I'd really appreciate it. It's been a few months since I first seriously started thinking about divorce, and the past weeks have been intense, emotionally, mentally, and even physically. I never realized how much energy goes into unraveling not just a relationship, but the life you built around it. Every little decision feels monumental. The apartment, bills, furniture, even which side of the bed goes to whom. Ethan has been complicated. He's oscillated between pleading, trying to fix things, and giving me space when I push back. I've had to establish boundaries, firm, sometimes uncomfortable boundaries, to protect my mental health. I told him early on that I need honesty, not promises. That was the hardest conversation, because he looked genuinely shocked. He always assumed compromise could save us, but for me, the core issues run deeper than just changing habits or routines. The apartment has been the biggest stressor. We have a 1-year lease, so I've had to decide whether to stay for the remainder or break it early. After weighing the financial and emotional costs, I decided to sublet it and find a smaller place closer to my family. It wasn't easy telling Ethan. He tried to argue, saying, "We can make this work if we just live together a little longer." I had to be firm. "Ethan, this isn't about living arrangements. It's about us, and us doesn't work." I've been seeing a therapist regularly, Dr. Karen Fields, who has been invaluable. She's helped me untangle my feelings of guilt, fear, and lingering attachment. Some days I leave the sessions crying, other days relieved and sometimes just exhausted. But she's helped me understand that leaving doesn't mean I failed. It means I'm choosing myself, and sometimes that's the hardest thing to do. Family has been supportive, though reactions vary. My mom, Claire, visits often, bringing groceries or just sitting with me, listening as I vent. She reminds me that prioritizing my happiness is not selfish. My dad, Michael, has been more practical, helping me research living options, budgeting, and even talking to real estate agents. Both have been a lifeline, though I worry about burdening them too much. Friends have been enlightening. Hannah checks in daily, sometimes with tough love, She says, "You're not doing anything wrong. 1 year doesn't invalidate your feelings. You deserve to be happy." James, on the other hand, gives more blunt, practical advice. Don't overthink the emotional side. Focus on the steps, get legal advice, and keep moving forward. Both perspectives help balance the emotional roller coaster. Ethan's parents have been harder to deal with. They send texts asking me to consider reconciliation, or think about what marriage really means. Some days I want to respond and defend myself. Other days I just delete the messages. I've realized I can't control their reactions. I can only control my own. Speaking of legal matters, Claire Simmons, my lawyer, has been amazing. She helped me understand that a year of marriage is actually easier to untangle than longer unions. She explained what to expect in terms of dividing assets, lease responsibilities, and any shared accounts. Even simple things like changing the names on utilities or sorting out joint bank accounts felt overwhelming at first. But having her guidance made it manageable. The emotional side, though, is still tricky. Some days I feel relief, a heavy weight lifted, a future I actually want to live approaching. Other days I feel grief. I grieve the what-if version of Ethan and me. The wedding day, the honeymoon phase, all the plans we made. I still care for him in some ways, which makes moments of guilt inevitable. I sometimes wonder if I'm being too hasty. But when I examine my day-to-day feelings, the truth is clear. I am happier imagining life apart than life together. I've also started small rituals to reclaim my independence. I bought my own space in a storage unit, separated my personal belongings, opened a solo bank account, and started cooking meals just for myself. Every small act feels like a step toward rebuilding a life where I'm the primary caretaker of my happiness. The hardest moments are still emotional. Last week, Ethan broke down during a conversation and said, "I thought we could get through this. I thought you loved me." I had to respond gently, but firmly, "Ethan, I do care about you. But love isn't enough to make us compatible. Staying together for the sake of love isn't fair to either of us." It was brutal seeing him cry. But I know holding on for either of our sakes would be worse in the long run. The clarity I'm gaining is almost shocking. I've spent so much time analyzing my feelings, talking to therapists, parents, friends, and even reflecting alone. The conclusion is consistent. Leaving is the right choice. The logistics are messy, the emotions raw, but the destination, a life I can genuinely feel excited about, is worth it. I've started looking at apartments near my family, and even browsing colleges for night classes or continuing education. The idea of building a life where I feel fully in control, without compromise on the essential parts of my happiness, is exhilarating. For the first time in months, I can actually picture a future where I'm content and thriving. I don't know exactly what the coming weeks will look like. I expect tears, difficult conversations, and adjustments, but I finally feel like I have a roadmap, and more importantly, I finally feel ready to prioritize myself without apology.